So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was the yokai and the Prince of Fem Devil? Movie 2. Light taps of metal and porcelain chimed in and out, filling in the gap left behind by the silence in the room. The silence was occasionally invaded by the rapid tapping of footsteps that somehow blended in perfectly with the moving utensils, giving the room the impression of a restaurant. The remainder of the chicken and potato soup never saw the light of day again. The blonde-haired boy, seated at a grand table, gently returned the spoon into the bowl in front of him before patting his mouth with a napkin, then setting it down as well. He sighed, feeling the fleeting warmth rushing into his stomach. It faded as quickly as the strange yet wonderful taste that had been the soup. It had been close to a week since the events of the boy's duel against the heir of the House of Phoenix had occurred, with him claiming victory by a landslide. Well, at least he didn't recall getting hit once. Call it the ultimate flex if you will. The table he was sat at wasn't in the extremities in size, however, it had enough space to fit a dozen people without compromising their arm and personal space. It was crafted from the finest oaks, so fine that it seemed unearthly. Since did oak have a purplish hue? Most people would miss the hue because of the crimson color tablecloth with a very familiar symbol near its center. There was an elegantly designed black and white vase at the center of the table, and in it were what appeared white roses, but unlike the ones on Earth, they had a surreal feel to them. Their white was so vibrant that it seemed unnatural, almost as if someone had used magic to enhance its beauty. Tiny flakes and specks of light drifted away from the bleached petals before fading into nothingness like a dream that had no hopes of existing. Something isn't right, he thought, his drowsiness wearing off. He remembered going to bed with Kaneko because Riaz was still mad about the camel outfit. Her family got the funny idea of turning his apartment complex into a fucking mansion, but for some reason, she specifically ordered him to go sleep on the couch. He refused and just left the building for a little while. Sleeping outside was not something that made him uncomfortable, in fact, it brought him nostalgia. However, his favorite catgirl had other plans. Unlike the week which he had quickly adapted to, he didn't wake up with Kaneko tightly wrapped around his arm. Instead, he was seated at an unfamiliar table, which normally is alarming, but he did not feel any hostility directed at him. Well, there was plenty in the form of presences that oddly felt like a certain burning chicken. He didn't care, he could fold them anytime he wished. Easy. And because they were no threat to him, he proceeded to enjoy the breakfast placed before him. After finishing, he took a moment and paused, finally allowing his perception to arrest his attention. He was in an unreasonably large and well-furnished room, bustling with activity. Gorgeous young women in maid outfits rushed in and out of the room, going past sadder-looking men in black suits and shades standing guard by the massive door. What the hell is that in the corner? A horse, dragon thing. Naruto didn't know what the hell that was before it was converted into a devil. He ignored its appearance after realizing that one of his friends was quite literally a dolphin horse thing. Riaz. He turned to the woman seated on his right, close to the head of the table seat. Yes honey, lovely baby boo. First of all. Don't call me that, he frowned slightly hearing her stifled giggles. He finally decided to acknowledge the other people seated at the table. There were two men with crimson hair, one with a stubble and the other with nothing. There however an enormous difference in power, both politically and physically between them. There was a woman who strongly resembled Riaz, but had larger breasts and had brown hair. He could see Ravel and her parents, Sona, and a girl who resembled her, but with shorter and larger breasts and was dressed in a kimono. Secondly, why am I at a table? Having breakfast with you no. Devils. You planning some crazy ritual? Again? It was that one time. Naruto gave her a flat look, okay, 8 times, but it was all for your safety. You won't want scary monsters crawling under your bed, would you? She asks, making exaggerated creepy motions with her fingers. Bayu. I ain't 5 you know, he sighed in exasperation. Actually, how the hell did you get me here anyway? And dressed me? He inquired plainly, looking at the black suit with a white dress shirt. Oh, I kidnapped you, she smiled innocently as Naruto made a Kiyoshi Fujino face. What the FIMA. What the hell? There is no way you did that. Yet, here you are, she snickered at his disgruntled face. So dear, she started, I have been made aware that you put Lady Ravel Phoenix in a contract, so that has to be settled today. Why you didn't tell me anything about that is beyond me, but anyway, we didn't do it on other days because of outrage from the Phoenix clan, but with efforts from my brother and cooperation from the heads, we were able to calm the crowd, she explained, giving him dull stare, drawing a yawn from him. The girl frowned briefly before giving him a mischievous smile. Oh, and I wanted you to meet mother and father. He took a moment. I'm sorry, what? Isn't it natural for the man to meet the woman's parents? That moment there proved that confidence was a mere illusion. He raised his arm to wipe the sweat forming on the temple. He for some reason no longer felt like the cunning fox he was, instead, he felt like an injured deer that knew it was being watched by a tiger. The dad was staring at him with a critical eye causing him to flinch. His hidden hand formed a tight fist, trying to fight off the anxiety that had utterly demolished his years of shinobi training. Damn woman, got me. I hate you Riaz, he wailed internally, seeing the girl smirk from the corner of his eye. You got this, he hyped himself up. Good morning, mother and father. I don't get this at all. He screamed internally. PFFT, Riaz turned away from her lover, covering her mouth. For fuck's sake Naruto. Get a grip, you're this generation's god of shinobi. How would your subjects feel seeing you like this? And Kurama, he could practically hear the fox rolling in laughter in its grave. There was a moment of silence then. Good morning dear, the flaxen-haired woman with violet eyes responded warmly. The red-haired man with the stubble stared him down. If the boy was surprised then he most definitely did not show it. He had assumed her parents were extreme traditionalists and hence show an unfathomable amount of hostility towards him, but that did not seem to be the case at all. Even if they were hostile, they probably wouldn't really be a threat, but still, the nervousness would remain, though without it bothering him, simply because they were her parents. It was a phenomenon that affected a large percentage of men, and unfortunately for him, he was one of them. He immediately felt the years of extreme antisocial behavior returning to bite his ass. He wondered about things such as looking his best or perhaps calling them by their first names or really stupid things he'd never think of. If her mother and father were hostile, he'd have a lot less anxiety, but there was nothing. Like really. Nothing like hate directed at him, and that was strange. They evaded his expectations like that one kid in dodgeball. Were these really the people who were responsible for Ria's suffering? What the hell? He was most certainly more than baffled. He didn't have much of a problem with Surziches as a king that showed favoritism wouldn't be respected and thus lose power which would suck for the devil world. But these people in front of him were her parents. That's right. Them. It was them that caused that mess. Don't go off. Different cultures, different values. Don't go off, the hostility within him that wasn't present slowly started crawling into his being. Relax, his breathing slowed slightly. The woman let out a melodious giggle, moving her hand to cover her mouth. There is no need to be so guarded. It's a pleasure to meet you Naruto. My name is Benelana Gremory, Ria's mother, it's a great pleasure to finally meet you. The shinobi had a puzzled look on his face as he listened to the introduction. Surzich's muffled chuckles could be heard at the table. Yes, Naruto finally responded after a few fleeting seconds, it's a pleasure to meet you too. I can see the resemblance, his eyes snapped back before they committed what he felt would be a felony. Naruto averted his gaze slightly. I blame you for this essay. Next time I train you, you are going to need a replacement for your entire skeletal system. No, wait. That's illogical as I have had perverted characteristics way before I met him. Calm down. Elsewhere, the crimson sphere in Issei's hand blasted through the air before breaking apart into dozens of balls of flame. The boy looked at his scaly left hand, frowned before shivering. Why do I feel like I just dodged a bullet? The boy then paused again, and the feeling of dread poured into his consciousness. Why do I hear boss music? Ara, did I say you could stop Issei-kun? The boy didn't answer. Instead, he heard the loud crackling of lightning. You blonde asshole, this is your fault. She is taking out her frustration on me. The boy cold run, instead he accepted his fate. Return, it took Riaz all she had not to laugh at the boy before deciding to slip her hand under the table and hooked her fingers between his. This was most definitely not missed by the other people at the table. The brown-haired woman couldn't help but feel elated by her daughter's actions because she felt that the greedy princess she had raised had shown signs of a great amount of growth. She felt pride not only as a mother but a fellow woman at the fact that Riaz was in a very healthy relationship where comfort went both ways. She saw the slight quivering that was on the boy's shoulders fading. She then turned her head to meet the eyes of a blond man with blue eyes. The man was shaking, his hands tensing more and more as they heard Naruto's voice. The boy just sat there, acting as if what he did had never happened, as if he was but an innocent babe. Him not looking in their direction made him feel humiliated but more so frustrated at the amount of damage he had caused during that evening. The boy waltzed into the room and defeated his son and his peerage. He would have been more than fine with that, in fact, he would have been happy as it would have taught his son humility, but the boy took it way too far. Despite Riser's shortcomings, his father loved him dearly and naturally as a parent, he strongly desired to shield him from the dangers of the world, keeping him from harm and giving him a path to happiness which he failed at. He could have protested against the Demon Lord's decision to allow an unknown to face Riser for Ria's hand. He could have offered to duel the boy instead. He could have. He could have done something. He participated in both the Great War and the Civil War, so he knew how dangerous wild cards could be. Race was irrelevant when it came to wild cards, meaning that even the weakest race, humans, were capable of causing precarious scenarios. This lapse in judgment resulted in his daughter giving herself up to the human to spare her brother from an even worse fate than hers, and just like that he had lost two children, one to the man and the other to trauma induced by him. The man bit his lip, feeling the taste of iron washing over his tongue, before the feeling quickly faded because his regenerative abilities kicked in. The boy left his son with burnt plastic-like scars that could not be healed by the clan's regenerative abilities, nor Phoenix tears. The greatest physicians in the underworld were at a loss as well, because the nature of the man's wounds was beyond them. It would be a great fortune if it ended there, but that was not the case at all. The young devil's mental health had waned significantly, to the point that he locked himself in his room because he had a strong fear towards anything that had a humanoid appearance. The cause was likely the fact that his peerage had betrayed him and the fact that the people of the Phoenix clan had features similar to that of the boy that had done that to him. This led to his family approaching him with magic that disguised their blonde and blue-eyed features. Riser feared his own family and refused any contact with his peerage, and that marked the first time he was truly alone. He just sat on his bed, staring blankly at his sheets, refusing to move from his spot. He'd occasionally scream at nothing. Rage without provocation and just whimper pathetically. Both Lord and Lady Phoenix hated themselves, considering themselves failures for being unable to defend their children. Ravel revealing why Riser was not killed was a great shock to everyone, and a rumor about her statement quickly spread, causing an uproar amongst the people. Matters settled down eventually when the Devil King himself got involved. Soon after that, there were meetings. Lots and lots of meetings weighed the benefits and consequences of trying to ignore the contract with the boy. Almost everyone felt that the contract should be ignored as they felt no obligation to fulfill an agreement with a creature below them. But there was one problem. His power was unknown. The older devils that made up the Phoenix clan's council correctly pointed out the boy's power exceeded a high-class devils by a significant margin, allowing him to defeat not only the prodigious son but all his servants as well. It is worth noting that Riser Phoenix's peerage was amongst the best in the underworld, with its weakest members being skilled warriors, and the boy had walked over them as if they were insects and escaped the fight without so much as a scratch. Another thing was his ability to forcefully turn the Phoenix clan's regeneration against them. This knowledge not only rattled the House of Phoenix but other clans as well. The reason was that he displayed the ability to forcefully take control of magical abilities, which are what most of the remaining pillars specialize in. The Phoenix clan's regeneration is considered a magical ability, and so their ability being turned into the opposite of what it does is terrifying to every clan. Another addition is that the famous Phoenix tears could not heal wounds inflicted by him. His absurd powers drew a lot of attention to him, and research of his history was done with the only results being his birthplace in the USA, his middle school, and his parents' deaths etc. Their corpses were uncovered as well, but they were so normal that they made his abilities even more questionable. Naruto used Yun release to create bodies. Took him over a week to create perfect human bodies. It caused unrest in most high-class devils, with the House of Gremory as an exception. The heiress was taken in for questioning, but even she insisted she was unaware of the human's latent abilities, and when they tried to apply spying magic on her, it would mysteriously disappear by unknown means. Both the elders and the clan's heads ended up agreeing to just honor the deal made between the human and the young devil, fearing what would happen to their people if he got his way. They were not alone in caution as the demon lord behaved warily around the boy, making Lord Phoenix feel like he had lost everything. But still, she was his daughter. There surely was something he could do right. The life of your child or the life of thousands, he almost chuckled in self-deprecation. Ziotica sat at the head of the table with his wife, son and Phoenixes to his right and his daughter, her lover and her friend to his left. At the opposite side of the table sat another one of the great devil lords, Seraphol Leviathan. The girl from the House Phoenix raised her head and had her eyes glued onto the blue eyes of the boy with whisker marks. She flinched before tearing them away and went back to staring at her hands. Naruto took a sip from his cup. Yes indeed, it is a pleasure to finally meet your acquaintance, boy, the red-haired man started in. The cup was placed back onto the table as the boy straightened his back. While it would have been more preferable to meet Mayu, my son-in-law, in a less formal setting, this has to be done due to the stir you caused in the previous week, the man explained. Before we move on to that, we of the Gremory clan would like to apologize for all the harm done to you, your well-being and your relationships. You are apologizing to the wrong person, he responded whilst shaking his head. The man stayed silent for a moment, his eyes wide before nodding. Briaz, I have forced my greed onto you without considering your feelings. I am really sorry, he turned to his daughter and lowered his head. I as well, then Alana had a regretful look on her face. I understand that simply apologizing is not enough and... Briaz gave her parents a gentle smile. I can forgive you but... I can't forget but... Let's just bury the hatchet and keep it in the past. There was silence before the man just nodded, muttering, thank you. The reason they could not spend more time talking was simply that they had other matters to attend to. Their family matters could wait, this cold. This is my wife and seated next to her is my son and current Devil King Serziches, then beyond his are the Lord and Lady Phoenix and their daughter who you have met already. Then on the opposite side is another one of the great devil kings, Lady Seraphol Leviathan, and next to her is her sister and co-ruler of the territory Riaz occupies. In a manner uncharacteristic of himself, the boy lowered his head slightly in greeting. The other save for the phoenix returned them vocally. As for why you are here. To put it bluntly, you are a threat. Huh? Really? It took all Lord Phoenix had not to jump and shout at the boy. Because you are an enigma, you are considered a risk to the security of the Sisters of the Mass. I see, a person with unknown powers being very close to a devil of such standing is alarming. Explains the assassins I had to kill off this past week, the boy responded, nodding slightly, drawing wide eyes from the table. I don't suppose you sent them. If so then should I take that as a threat I wonder. That's strange, there were no reports of any units being dispatched to eliminate you, Serziches chimed in with a frown, I assure you, we as far as I am aware, we did not send people after you, he continued. The others also confirmed the man's statement. Eyes darted amongst each other in visible unease, Naruto. You dealt with assassins this past. Why didn't you tell me anything? The eyes eventually landed on the couple seated next to each other and their child. The couple opened up to protest, but they were cut off by Naruto. Not like someone was acting like a girl on her first period, he responded plainly drawing a frown from his girlfriend, no need to be suspicious of anyone here. No lies have been told. I am an empath that specializes in negative emotions, he casually revealed, earning even more surprised looks. Servants detecting the change in atmosphere immediately vacated the room save the horse dragon, a few satyr guards and Graphia. See, Serziches responded slowly, to be honest, I don't find this surprising as higher class devils sometimes desire to get rid of impurities and competition through disagreeable means. You don't say. I have their corpses in my possession. I will hand them over after this meeting is done, he said, now to business, I assume Lady Leviathan being present means that the faction I am affiliated with is still in question. Well, I understand that you will take my words with a grain of salt, but I am human and am not affiliated with any existing factions, he said. I see but then, Mr. Uzumaki, that brings the question. What is the origin of your powers? You not being affiliated with a faction is extremely unlikely, given that you have great power and have displayed great mastery over that power. If you are really 17 like you claim then that means that there must have been someone responsible for training you, Seraphol responded calmly, staring at the boy. I can't answer that question because I don't know. The only thing I am sure about is that my powers are the result of my union with a fragment of a dead god, he half-lied smoothly. He had already told Riaz the truth, but given her inexperience with being in a serious setting with multiple people of power, her body language would show, and as such, as a precaution, he had secretly sent a bit of his chakra into her to assist her in maintaining control. He only gave her a brief summary, they agreed to talk about it in greater detail at a later date as the two became busier. He wasn't Sasuke who could outright hijack people's bodies, but he could affect some people's bodies to a certain degree. Ria's body being responsive to him and managing to identify him made it much easier. Him not divulging information was because he did not want the devils deciding to take over the new world and end up attracting the attention of an Otsutsuki. That wouldn't be fun to deal with. Just like they were unsure of him and his motives, he was unsure of them and their motives, so he held back information just in case. The dead god, Sona muttered softly before pushing her glasses up, and what was their name? The hell would I know that? The god didn't even have a physical form cause you know he is dead. And how did you come to the conclusion that the entity that merged with you was a god? I don't really have a way to describe it. But it feels divine somehow. And yes, I know what divinity feels like. Was in China the other year and saw a dude with a spear that drove people that looked at it mad, and it particularly had a stronger effect on Christians. That thing felt like a Bible but on steroids and there was another presence in it. Then I saw some dude with a buzz cut in India and the amount of power coming off him was ridiculous, but it felt similar to the one in that spear. The wavelength of energy between those two instances was similar to the wavelength of my power and hence how I decided that it's divine. You have had contact with a possessor of the true Longinus. Serziches cut in, fists clenched tightly. And Sakura. Yes. I wasn't doing anything silly, I was just touring like any other normal person there. We digress. Dead god, it's a dead god because it doesn't feel alive and it's divine in nature. This power is now mine and as for how I came into contact with it. Probably had something to do with the trip I had in Greece this one holiday with my parents. I have had contact with various deities and as such I can judge whether your conclusion is correct. If you would. Naruto nodded as a magic circle appeared above him and created a barrier. He began molding Six Paths power, making sure its chakra aspect didn't leak instead, he let its divine characteristics leak, cutting down suspicion towards the boy. So it's true. Serziches nodded, would I be wrong to assume that you suspect that this power originally belonged to Pan? Nay, your assumption is correct, Naruto nodded. Surziches rubbed his temples, acknowledging that what the boy had said could be true, as it was not unheard of for people to gain power from a deceased powerful figure. The best example being the humans that inherited the spirits of great heroes from the past, such as Jeanne d'Arc and Hercules, and even his own pawn, Beowulf. But a human inheriting the power of a god was unheard of, but couldn't be ruled out as it was very possible. In theory. But then why do label yourself as a human? Seraphil asked slowly, suspicion waning. I have not experienced any changes in both my physical form and my astral body. I haven't had any desires that would be odd for the average person. I still get tired and want to take naps and get hungry and want to eat. I am just a human with power just like magicians are humans with. Well, magic. I have the power, but my nature as a human hasn't changed at all. Magicians use magic, but I don't see them being labeled as not humans. With that in mind, why can't I label myself as human? I'm technically like them after all. Fair enough, Seraphil nodded before allowing her sister to bring up another query. Are the whisker marks on your face a result of the power you gained? Sona asked, tilting her head. Yeah. I theorized that since my favorite animal is a fox, Pan's power gave these to me. Acceptable, the devils had partially fallen for his lie. Tell us then, why did you keep these powers a secret? And how did you reach an expert's level of skill in using them? My parents' death was a result of an attack by monsters. I don't remember much of what happened, but they brought all their ranks along. I killed them all in my rage, including their leaders. I then discovered that I could instinctively suppress them because if I didn't then more of them would come for me. As for how I learned to use them well, this may sound silly but. Since I could control water, electricity, earth, flames and winds, I went to do research at a superpower wiki online and tried replicating the powers explained there. Practiced for a few years then boom. That and I have done a fair amount of martial arts as a child, he explained, ignoring the giggling coming from Rias. He went online too. That is surprisingly clever, Sona paused, then complimented. Just wanted to live normally, but this annoying thing came into my life, he gestured to his girlfriend faking a frown, whilst Rias faked a gasp, drawing chuckles. So, in conclusion, you are not affiliated with any faction. Yes. If I was, I would have exposed myself and my abilities. I came to Ria's rescue as soon as I regained my memories after Ria's spell failed, so I probably wouldn't have had time to contact my superiors. Magical items? None, the Gremory family should know of this as they made a mansion out of my apartment without any notice. They could have easily found suspicious items, he responded calmly. A lot of us are capable of storing our items in a separate dimension. Can't we assume you can too? You already displayed space-time manipulation by teleporting out of the hall, Seraphil pressured, leaning forward with a bone-chilling stare. Well I can do that, he admitted with a light shrug, but still, I can guarantee that my items have nothing to do with communication. The only things I have are battle-related, he waved his hand, generating a white haze bubble that slowly bubbled up in size and floated above the table. The haze cleared and revealed hundreds of bladed weapons, from great swords to katanas to spears to kusurigama and many other types of weapons, all in pristine condition. The bubble allowed the aura exuded by the items to flow out, and most of the items within the bubble were normal, with the snake Jan as an exception. These are all my weapons. Was hoping to get Rias to get me guns, he said almost gleefully. I'm not getting you any guns, the young woman shot him down, making him frown. Seraphil stared at the weapons aimlessly floating in the bubble and nodded slowly. The only item of supernatural quality is that sword over there. I do not recognize it, what is its origin? She asked. This woman. At this point, you are just finessing me. I found a dying Burmese python with a gash on its eye. The perpetrator left the weapon he used to harm it. At that time, I couldn't heal so I somehow combined it with a sword. I then named it after one of the imperial swords of Japan, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi to reference how quickly snakes move through grass, almost as if cutting it. I see. How much power did you gain from the fragment? I can't quantify it due to my insufficient exposure to the supernatural world, but I suppose I could destroy Kuo. I guess, he faked a thoughtful voice, placing his index finger on his chin. Seraphil closes her eyes and leaned back, displaying satisfaction. While he wasn't specific on how the scale of his power, his destroying Kuo gave them a good baseline to start from. The woman understood that the boy was very perceptive and incredibly cunning, and as such chose his words carefully. He says destroy Kuo but. Wouldn't destroying Japan be destroying Kuo as well or destroying Asia, that would be destroying Kuo as well. Him saying he could destroy Kuo was very vague to her. Surziches nearly narrowed his eyes but kept himself from doing so. He could tell that the boy was leaving out a number of details, but it was relieving to know that he truly wasn't affiliated with an enemy faction. If he was capable of feeling the exact nature of an item and a weapon like the Longinus, then it wouldn't be far-fetched to think he could detect how powerful the devils at the table were. The boy showed no signs of being intimidated and did not seem to be holding himself back and faking calmness, meaning that he simply didn't see them as a threat. He would give the boy the benefit of a doubt and turn a blind eye because it was clear as the moon and stars in a cloudless sky that his sister and the boy were in love with each other. So he stayed silent. He could see that Serafal and his parents were within the same thought range as him but took no action for their own reasons. What most inexperienced people would miss about Naruto was the way he completely controlled the fight with Riser. There were no ifs and buts or maybes, he won by a landslide and could have ended the fight whenever he wished. There was no way the boy wouldn't be well known within the supernatural because the way he fought displayed that he was highly experienced and just practicing was simply not enough to make him that strong, instead his skills were similar to his. Born from years of combat. Practice is never enough to close down the gap in experience, and that boy was highly experienced. No rumors about him. Just nothing. It would have been one thing if the boy just nuked the whole area and won, but he didn't. Instead, he opted to take them on fairly and disassemble their teamwork with his superior technical skills. What he had been saying was likely false, but Surziches understood that sometimes lies were very close to the truth, and because of that he suspected that the boy had a form of apotheosis. Maybe he was a forgotten god trying to live as a human. Despite the possible threat, however, Surziches could not bring him to be paranoid about the boy. With the amount of power he had, he could have easily kidnapped the two rulers of Kuo and killed off their peerages before holding them hostage, but he did not. When the boy came into the ballroom, he reeked of hostility. His face was as plain as a white wall, but his eyes betrayed him, they showed everything he felt. His hostility was directed at the one and only Riser Phoenix. When he went to speak to Riaz alone, the darkness had disappeared as if it had never been there. Surziches could see how much the boy loved his sister and as such felt a sense of brotherhood. The boy had a variety of masks, but none could hide his feelings, his thoughts. What he did to Riser's peerage was cruel, but he had given them the chance to back down and let the boy fight their master. No good deed goes unpunished. They were punished for their loyalty. It was clear as day that the boy would not hesitate to get rid of anything that would bring harm to those close to him. That included high-class devils and their subjects, and so it was his duty to make sure the boy was not antagonized unless necessary. His power being a question mark was very unsettling, to say the least. Surziches may be in the top 10 strongest beings in the world, but he knew that people much weaker than him could kill him if the conditions were right. A solid example being the wielder of the true Longinus or the Dragon Eater scoring a good hit on him. It was even possible that the boy exceeded him in strength. Surziches frowned slightly as thoughts flooded his mind. He felt it was best to leave it. His intuition told him that the boy was only interested in keeping Riaz and her peerage safe, and as long as they were fine, there would be no problems. Surziches' next thought significantly soured his mood because they were related to the next issue at hand. Devilkind was notorious for being rebellious in instances that did not favor them more so than humans, and so examples had to be made to pacify them. They desired results, not words, which were why a weak devil would never become one of the 4 devil kings. The human was seen as a threat to what remained to the of the 72 pillars, and as Naruto had explained, they would try to get rid of him. He did not want to do this, but it had to be done or disaster could befall them in the future. What had to be done was the sacrificing of the Phoenix clan head's daughter. Riser's falling had shaken not only those of Phoenix, but all the leaders of the other clans. Ravel being handed over to the human because of the contract they made was one of the more logical solutions, as it would give the impression denying the boy was extremely dangerous. Negotiation could be attempted, but the data provided by Riaz and her peerage has shown that Naruto is a rather stubborn individual who clung to what he wanted and rarely had compromises. Now that we have reached a suitable level of discussion regarding your origin, it is time to settle Ravel Phoenix's contract with you. May I ask what kind of contract you made with her and if possible how, Surziches said, looking Naruto in the eye. The lone human's eyes trailed over to the Phoenix families once more and did not miss the shivering on their shoulders, despite their attempts to hide them. Nothing special I suppose. When I accepted the deal, a piece of my power entered her soul, and I am sure you understand what that entails, he shrugged, ignoring the horrified look present on their faces. Haven't learned how to manipulate souls yet. Don't look at me like that, he lied reaching for his cup and lifting it before frowning. Excuse me miss, mind getting me more juice? He called out to Graphia. Of course the maid appeared on his left and delivered his request. He relished the refined sweetness that invaded his mouth, either ignoring the tense atmosphere or being completely ignorant. Wait a minute. Let's make a deal. Lord Phoenix shot up from his chair, drawing a sigh from the spiky-haired blonde. We truly are sorry for the pain that our son Riser has caused you and Lady Riaz, he started. The boy held the urge to roll his eyes, here comes the but, he thought. But our daughter did nothing wrong, instead it should be us paying for our mistakes, he said. Father. Yes, you are paying by giving up one of the most important people to you, he responded smoothly. Let's say I agree to release her. What do I get out of it? Don't mistake me for someone who gives a shit about the affairs of devils. The only one I care for is Ria's, he continued, evoking a crescendo of emotions from the Phoenix clan. Wait, Uzumaki, don't be so unreasonable. Zip it, Sona, he didn't bother looking her way. To him, the focal point of the situation was the head of Phoenix himself. Phoenix tears. We are willing to part with a year's supply worth. If that is not enough, we are also willing to grant you riches beyond your imaginations and women. Women too. The finest in the underworld, beyond the ones found on Earth. Not interested. What? But the man seethed, his hair catching ablaze. Ria's cold and take it any longer, she opened her mouth, but a flat gaze from Naruto stopped her. It was that trust me look he always gave her in tough situations. She didn't understand what he was thinking, but with great reluctance, she stayed silent, watching everything unfold. To be honest, hearing you say that made me think of a few things. Aren't you being rather selfish right now? I can guarantee that your people will not be in a good spot if I accept your terms. You sure are a wonderful ruler, a light sip tore through the silence. The boy placed his elbow on the table and leaned into the palm of his hand, paying no heed to the man's turmoil. Please reconsider, this time Lady Phoenix spoke up, please have sympathy for our family. Kinda ironic that you say that. If you had sympathy for Ria's then none of this would have happened. I can see where Riser's dumb ideals come from, the boy snorted, you speak of sympathy, yet you move to force someone into something they refuse to do. Driving them to the point of obsession with media to escape reality. Kinda funny, huh? The boy had the gall to look like he was having the time of his life. I understand our hypocrisy, but you have to understand that devils. I'm going to have to stop you right there, lady. You have the technology to convert any species into devils, but can't I don't know grow babies in tubes. Converting other species to devils is just hilarious. Like seriously, what are you, China? Conquer the world by taking in other races and making them your slaves. Wow. You have to understand that. No. I really don't. This is just another case of boomers refusing to pass the torch to the next generation. Pass the torch? Yes. There was a brief pause until Surziches spoke up. I believe this will be beneficial to all of so could you please explain, he requested. Sure. So you guys clapped some cheeks during the war, but what caused it exactly? It was obviously the older generation's desire to continue the war whilst you younger ones desired to rebuild your world. Your generation was obviously in the right as continuing the war would only drive you to extinction. Refusal to pass the torch is basically forcing yourself to be the main character in a story that isn't about you at all. In this case, it's forcing this generation to carry on traditions like yours without considering how it could affect them. You say you are doing it for the good of devil kind, but the hatred will accumulate so much that it will tear your species apart and drive you into ruin. New generations come with new innovations ideas, and refusing to let them grow is essentially killing your own future in the long run. Everyone has a role to play, and playing a role that is not yours will harm them. I believe knowing your traditions and knowing your roots is important, but forcing yourself to become a person based on those roots won't go well. A lot of problems will go away if you pass the torch. For example, some devils' hatred with the angels. If they don't pass that hate to their children, then their children will start focusing on what's the same not what's different, he paused allowing it to sink in. To me, Ria's is human but with wings. If you can find what's the same in someone instead of what's different, then maybe you won't find yourself in nasty situations, he shrugged. But my words are merely an opinion I guess. Anyways, the old coots from your species will come for me and my family. I have no real reason to antagonize you any further than this, so I expect the same. You may give me promises, but you will never give me guarantees, and if your promise is broken, then it will lead to me taking less pleasant manners to handle my debacles. Plus I also want to do this as well for more. Personal reasons, he gave a ghost smile. Lord Phoenix said nothing and just relaxed his body, keeping his mouth shut. He could not say anything else to the boy, instead, he looked into his daughter's eyes and was taken aback by the strong resolve she had in her eyes. Now then Mr. Phoenix, if you take into consideration what I said, it is not your place to make decisions for your daughter. She understood very well what she was going to get into and made the deal regardless of the consequences. She is mine now and I have no reason to give her up. I ask you then good sir, what can you give someone who has almost they want? He asked amusedly, watching them squirm under his gaze. It's okay father, mother, Ravel comforted before taking her mother's hand into her own. Inasmuch as Ravel feared the human, she held no hatred towards him instead she somewhat felt a sense of appreciation. He could have easily incapacitated her at that moment and moved on to kill her brother, but he didn't. He showed emotions. Sympathy. Monsters did not stop to consider other people's emotions, but he did. He wasn't a monster. During the days that passed after the engagement party, Ravel had a lot of time to herself. To think about everything. To think about a reason for sacrificing herself, and the answer was simple. Ravel loved her older brother. She remembered the days when the boy was gentle and respected not only adults but his peers as well. He would show concern over small animals that were subject to cruel pranks by children practicing magic and gently tend the roses in the garden with the gardeners. She remembered playing, falling and scraping her knee and head carry her back to the mansion, despite the fact that her bruises could have healed themselves with ease. She looked up to her older brother, but the one knew slowly starting warping. She didn't understand why it happened. Perhaps it was his company or his realization that he could get away with doing a lot of things, or perhaps he got poisoned during his first taste of women. The one she knew was gone, blinded by materials and swayed easily by temptation. Their relationship halted as their bond was forgotten in favor of all he had and could have. That didn't stop her from loving him because she felt that their bond as a sibling would never fade even if he changed. She later joined his peerage and years passed by, and she slowly started to lose hope in the old Riser, returning until that one faithful day. Riser had mistakenly underestimated one seemingly weak human who proceeded to defeat his peerage and corner him. She could see the fear building up in the fear that his clan's great power would save him. The fear that death itself was upon, and so the man begged the people he thought loved him, but to no avail. They were no longer concerned about his fate, instead, they were concerned about themselves, all except her. She would have been just fine if she stayed out of the way, but she moved and shielded him with fear, threatening to rip her heart out of her chest and drive her brain to madness. Until she felt her beloved older brother returning. She felt strength and courage as she felt that it was her duty as his sibling to protect him. She stood her ground and faced the devil himself. Standing in front of her with immaculate clothes, highlighting that their attempts were nothing. A hopeless situation indeed, but she still stood her ground. And she begged for Riser's life because she felt that he deserved a second chance. To start over. Saying that her conscience was clear would be a lie as she berated herself over her choice, but still, even that did not shake her. She had resolved to be taken away by his cruel arms except. She realized she only saw the bad side of the man attacking her family. For some reason, she did not believe that he was evil just. Furious. But he still had the mind to stop and reconsider. Then it happened. His eyes changed so much that she pitied him. She knew that he wasn't cruel and thought that perhaps becoming his servant wouldn't be too bad. Perhaps losing her would make Riser wake up and help him become a better person, so with that in mind she was at peace. Naruto put down his cup, then slowly raised his arm, his index finger slowly uncurling from his fist. His hand turned in a way that made his palm face the ceiling and pulled his index finger back before returning it to its former position, then repeated. Wait. Ravel, her mother called out to the girl. The girl was dressed in a flowing pink and frilly noble dress and wore a necklace with emeralds. The girl stayed silent and rose from her seat before moving around the table to stand by Naruto's side, refusing to allow her gaze to drift into his eyes. I expect you to be at the house before the sun sets in Japan, he said simply. Yes. Master, she responded stiffly, fidgeting slightly. Naruto's raised his hand and it was encased as a golden flame. Come closer, he beckoned, and she obeyed after a moment of hesitation. She saw his hand moving towards her chest, causing her to clamp her eyes shut and stiffen up, preparing herself for the worst. Instead she felt a warmth in her chest. He wasn't touching her per se, more like going through her. She then shivered, feeling something that was accustomed to having in her body being removed. The feeling stopped and she opened one eye before mirroring the looks that everyone on the table had. On Naruto's hand was a chess piece. The boy then tossed a piece to her father, who caught it. You are mine now, that piece is no longer necessary, he said, to which she lowered her head slightly. Yes, she responded. He nodded and turned back to the couple, particularly the woman on the verge of tears being held back by her husband. No. Please. She begged, tears spilling from her eyes. The speed at which she had risen from her chair has sent it backwards, nearing shattering if not for the efforts of one of the sadder guards. Can't you reconsider? The boy shook his head. Her face contorted, warping her face into something that could be seen in nightmares. If anything happens to my daughter, ill. Her hands crushed the part of the table she was clutching before burning the pieces away. Killing intent flowed out her body in waves, moving to trap the boy in what seemed to be a sea of flames, but he was unfazed. You speak as if you are in a position that's threatening to me. You can't do anything whilst I can whatever I wish. It'd be careful about pissing me off. I have no problem with bending your pure daughter over the table and dislocating her spine whilst forcing your eyes to stay open, he responded with a small smile. Eep, squeaked the red-faced Ravel. That's enough you, his cheek was pulled as he was scolded by Riaz, who looked like she had taken a bite out of something bitter. Lord Lucifer, she cried out. The super devil shook his head. Lady Leviathan, her tear-filled eyes bore into the devil, but she too shook her head. Lord Gremory, she whimpered. The man shook his head. They all agreed with Naruto to some extent, so they said nothing. Her eyes fell onto Venelana, causing the woman to sigh. I understand your pain, however your daughter made that deal. As devils, one of our greatest pride is fulfilling contracts, so not fulfilling a contract would shame us as a species. Besides. I do pity you for actually believing that my daughter's lover would bring harm to your daughter. Although his choice of words is questionable, pay attention to the type of person Rias is. Would she love a monster? She asked before closing her eyes before turning to Naruto. My son, I don't comprehend why it is that you desire to be misunderstood, but whatever it is that weighs heavily in your heart, it will fade with time. If you wish, you can confide in us as you are family, she smiled. Naruto had never cast a jutsu as quickly as he had now. It happened so quickly that he nearly released a spike of chakra which would have broken the jutsu. A simple illusion to mask his face. Thank you. Mother, the word came out his mouth much harder than it had earlier. He received a smile. Lady Phoenix just collapsed back into her chair and her sobs were muffled by her husband's embrace. Now then, Mr. Uzumaki, about Kuo. Yes. Your sister is under my protection as well, he responded easily, drawing wide eyes from Sona. That easily? No one is allowed to torture my arch-nemesis except for me. There was silence. Naruto. You really got to learn to use words that won't be misunderstood, said Rias after a moment of silence. Why? Sona asked him. Do I need a reason? I just feel like it. Plus, I won't want to put my thing over here in a tough spot if something happens to you while nothing happened to her, he responded whilst scooting his chair closer to Rias and pulling her into his arm. Moo. You can use nicer words to refer to me to dummy, she pouted. Naruto kissed her forehead and stroked her locks of hair. There. She slapped his hand and pushed him away and turning away while puffing her cheeks cutely. Sad, he wiped an imaginary tear. Mr. Uzumaki, you realize that your anonymity will be in jeopardy should you choose to do this. People will assume that you are affiliated with our faction. It's fine, Lady Leviathan. I have more than enough strength to defend myself and the two groups. Besides, them thinking that is fine. It will make them more nervous. Even if your enemy is a god. He shrugged, bring it on baby, he responded with ease. He paused, realizing that what he had said contrasted with his statement of simply being able to destroy Kuo. He just held in a sigh and finished his juice thinking Sasuke would be disappointed. He made no expression when the woman smirked. The boy turned to his lover, who flicked her hair slightly and turned to him. I've got a nice garden to show you. The time spent with the boy wasn't for nothing as she immediately understood what he was saying. I'm gonna turn your evening into a white night, he grinned, drawing powerful reactions. Oh Satan, Naruto. Just. Wow, Rias couldn't help but hide her face in embarrassment as her mother giggled at her expense. Even the servants were snickering. How improper, Uzumaki. Sona was ignored. Don't worry if you can't handle it, Ravel will be ready to help. Master. Her words were lost as her face exploded into crimson, displaying how innocent she was. We can get Sona in this as well, he continued, ignoring the spit take followed by violent coughing. Whoa there son, I'm going to have to stop you right there, do you mind explaining what turning your evening into a white night means? Go on, I'm listening, stay away from my Riatan, you fiend. My daughter's purity will not be tarnished by you, foul beast. Hey. Leave Sotan out of this, the table was filled with protests. It's fine, Lady Leviathan, if you join us, I'll let you have first dibs on her. Deal. Naruto nodded with a small smile. Your sister is very cute, he said casually. Of course she is my sister after all, Serapho gushed. Explains a lot. Man, thinking of you two below me. Something is rising and it sure as hell ain't the shield hero, he said, making Serapho hold in a laugh. They both turned to look at Sona, who looked to be on the verge of a mental breakdown. What the fuck? Sona screamed in a manner that was very unlike her. Rias rubbed her temples, watching a magic circle appear under Sona before whisking her away. Naruto and Serapho burst out in laughter and high-fived each other. Prank successful. That girl's gotta loosen up, Serapho said, recovering from her fit of giggles. I know right, the boy responded. Anyways, it's been nice getting along with you, Lady Leviathan, but I gotta attend to some business. No, call me Leviathan or Seratan or just Serapho. Nice meeting you, kid, have fun, she said, making him nod. Come on Rias, we losing hours. Been a week. I wanna beat on that bottom, he disappeared in a burst of speed and had her in his arms in a princess carry, going deaf to her protests. Ravel dear, get your nicest nightwear, I want to see you squirm, he licked his lips. Naruto blinked, no longer feeling Rias' weight in his arms. What the F, he watched Zeodicus gently put Rias on the ground before narrowing his eyes. Oh? Sir Lucifer, Sir Gremory and Sir Phoenix, you dare challenge me? You realize that I have no mercy towards cockblockers, yes? The ground below the boy caved. Surzicha smirked, our love for our family will not be defeated by you villain. As if it'd allow a delinquent to be anywhere near my Rias. Why am I here? Father. I mean, Ravel will not be devoured by you. Hey, isn't this the part where I say something cool? Seraphol's kimono was nowhere to be seen, instead she was in a pink outfit. Naruto scoffed and got into a stance, and the men followed suit, causing servants to dash out of the room. Okay, that's enough you three. The women with authority appeared and grabbed the men by their ears as the aura they released was shaking the house. Ah. Graphia, Imso. Surzicha's scream was muffled. What happened does not need to be mentioned. It just happened. Ria sighed, keeping a firm grip on her protesting boyfriend's ear. I promise to protect your daughter from this fiend, she said, turning to Lady Phoenix. He speaks cruelly, but his behavior doesn't really reflect the wonderful person he is. I swear on my honor that he will not harm your daughter in any way. How could you trust him? Can't you see that? A wise human wants that a person incapable of evil will struggle in protecting what he loves. He isn't evil, but he is more than willing to become a monster to protect us, the ones he considers a family. Rias closed her eyes, attempting to mask her sadness. You may refuse to acknowledge it, but he has shown you kindness by taking your daughter instead of what was offered to him, she explained. He spared you from the guilt you'd feel from your family falling into ruin, then being enslaved by other families, she finished before turning to her still whining fiancé. Go home stupid, I'll see you in a few days. I have duties to attend to and make sure you train us, AK. The girl grabbed his arm and pulled him into her embrace before getting on the tips of her toes and planting a kiss on his cheek. If you behave. I'll consider letting you turn my evening into a white night, she giggled, pulling away. The boy sighed in disappointment. Also, there has been really suspicious activity in our territory. Please see to it. Once you are done then you can train us, she requested. Okay, he turned to his in-laws. Until next time, he moved his hand and was about to form a single-handed sign. Master? Please wait. Naruto lowered his head and turned to Ravel, who had her head very low and looked close to prostrating herself. Speak, he said after looking her over again. Please. My brother. Please consider removing the curse you have placed on him. She begged. Why? He asked a simple question, his face devoid of emotion. Ravel froze, realizing words could not form. Was she too afraid to answer? If so, why? She had already taken the first step, so why couldn't she continue? The reason was simply because there was no reason for him to do it. She could claim that the curse could sap away at his energy, but that wouldn't be valid as self-sustaining curses did exist. She had nothing to offer him in exchange, so she just prostrated. The boy sighed, for someone in your position to make a request. Whatever, it's pointless for me to shit on him any longer. Very well, it is done. Most of his wounds shall heal by the end of week. He'll retain some scars as a reminder of what will happen if he points his dick where it doesn't belong, he said before disappearing in a shimmer. The girl raised her hand and muttered a quiet thank you before a magic circle appeared below her. She bowed before her superiors and teleported away so she could make preparations. The family stared at the spot the boy was in. He forgot to leave the corpses, Surzicha's muttered, drawing strange looks to him. What? Ria shook her head, turned to her mother with a fire in her eyes. Mother. I don't want to be a burden to him. Please train me, she requested, making Venelana nod slightly. I won't be gentle because you are my daughter. I wouldn't want it any other way. Issei fell onto his knees, his nostrils flaring, while his mouth opened wide to greedily devour oxygen. He was dressed in simple black shorts and a white tank top and had his boosted gear activated on his left hand. Seated atop of a boulder before him was Naruto, dressed in gray shinobi pants and a navy blue shirt. His ankles had white bandage wrappings and on his feet were black sandals. Dead up, his quiet but powerful voice echoed out through the barren landscape with purple glass-like layers forming a perimeter around them, blocking a viscous orange substance with dark patches on it. The space had a quartz ceiling and was lit up by dozens of green orbs and dozens of blue orbs. Is that the attitude you will maintain when Asia is about to be harmed? He asked, a dark tone lacing his words like poison. The words forced the Red Dragon Emperor to grit his teeth and slowly force himself to his feet. His muscles twitched and shivered in protest, harmonizing with the squeaking of his joints. The emerald gem on the boosted gear briefly shone a fluorescent light before dimming down. Reset. Issei gasped and collapsed into a heap, making Naruto tilt his head and scratch his temple. Maybe I overdid it with weight seal, he thought, referring to the seal Jiraiya had created. It was a storage seal that did not seal away an object's weight. Naruto had placed it on Issei before loading it up with Earth Chakra and setting up a transcription seal that would cast Earth release. Weighted boulder jutsu whenever Issei started getting used to the weight. Cruel but effective as it was, one of the ways Jiraiya had increased his speed to the point that he could just barely edge out Rock Lee in pure running speed, no enhancements. Naruto had been training Issei with a combination of height and hand-to-hand training. He'd have the boy sprint while being weighed down and force him to dodge a variety of objects, including but limited to kunai, ice shards, rocks, swords and fireballs. Naruto had the seals weigh him down while he dodged rapid-fire attacks before releasing their effects to allow the young devil to rest before repeating the process. Naruto had forgotten to deactivate the seals, which caused Issei to collapse in front of him due to the immense fatigue eating away at him. Gotta admit, the kid has made pretty good progress in the last couple of days, he thought, pushing his arms into the air and swaying his upper body a few times, holding in a yawn. The two young men were in an underground training facility that had been constructed by the god of shinobi, using the organic reanimation jutsu, the cursed marks he had been able to produce because of Shukaku and Earth Release. Naruto's had such a solid grasp of Earth Release that he could produce low-quality jewelry if given enough time and could produce quartz instead of traditional rocks and dirt. The cursed marks had been used to produce various seals that could seal away impacts that could damage the integrity of the structure, keep the Earth's particles from shifting, thereby creating a lattice, and held in stores of healing jutsu that would heal the trainees' wounds if necessary. "I'm sorry," Issei said, turning onto his back, wincing from his sore muscles and the bruises that colonized his body. Naruto shrugged and jumped to the boy, helping him up and creating a bench and a table. "All Gucci. It's lunchtime anyway," he shrugged before clapping his hands twice. A series of polygons drew themselves onto the before line and circled itself around them, creating a magic circle that gained a bright orange glow. The glow disappeared and from it appeared an extremely attractive young woman in her teenage years, dressed in a black French-maid outfit. Her hair was blonde and tied into drills that reached to her waist. Her name was Ravel Phoenix, Naruto's obligee and maid who attend to any of his desires. She was born and raised in the prestigious house of Phoenix before she had offered herself up as compensation in exchange for her elder brother's life. Now she served as Naruto's assistant and when called she would come to him at a moment's notice. In her hands was a white and crimson tray and on it was a bowl of ramen and a plate of sushi and onigiri. Chopsticks were neatly placed in front of the bowl and plate. Ravel placed the tray on the quartz table and picked up the plate and placed it in front of Issei. "Your lunch, Issei-san," she said, her pleasant voice ringing through his ears. Ink pigment pooled at Issei's cheeks as he moved his hands stiffly, his muscles screaming as he reached for his chopsticks, taking no notice of Naruto's raised eyebrow. Issei's eyes zeroed in on the young lady's chest, bringing the girl's attention to him. Ravel flinched slightly but maintained calmness and placed the tray in front of Naruto, presenting him with noodles and steaming broth. "Your ramen, my lord," she said, lowering her head. Issei watched with wide eyes as the young lady picked up the ramen spoon, dipped it into the soup, and lightly blew on it before bringing it up to his friend's mouth. "Oi. Oi. Oi. I'm the injured, tired one, feed me instead. Naruto, you fucking bastard, flexing on me, aren't ya?" Another spoonful of soup warmed his mouth, diffusing addictive flavors onto his tongue, pleasing him to the point that he had an uncharacteristic affable expression. "Your cooking is wonderful as always, Ravel," his countenance had a soft look. A ghost smile made its way onto the maid's features, bringing her outer beauty to new levels. "I am undeserving of your praise," she responded with humbleness and humility. The soup in the bowl had receded considerably, so the girl placed the spoon back onto the bowl and reached for the chopsticks. She picked up and wrapped the noodles around them before delivering them into Naruto's waiting maw. Hey. 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 What are you doing? Are you making fun of me or something? You aren't even injured and exhausted yet you are being fed. What are you, a baby? What the fuck? Issei complained with a tirade that reeked of jealousy. Ravel's eyes narrowed. "Issei-san, please refrain from disrespecting my master," the girl denounced, frowning at the lecherous dragon emperor. Issei averted his gaze with a humph and turned away from the master-servant duo. Naruto gave a wry smile, maintaining his usual relaxed expression to hide the aching that had come as a result of training. Issei and the other members of Ria's peerage were not the only people he threw the ringer. He put himself through the ringer because he hadn't trained in a decade and naturally he was very rusty. If the Presentum were to fight the version of himself that had entered the world a while back, he would lose and because of that, he had to regain his edge. The boy had applied weighted seals to himself as well and trained by sparring with a shadow clone, enhanced with 6 paths powers, whilst he would go base. Of course, the clone wrecked him, but he was getting back into shape. He had also strapped weight seals onto himself, turned invisible and sprinted across the globe in under 4 hours. After that, he would continuously practice hand seals and slowly got rid of them to practice casting jutsu without hand seals. Well, he had gotten so skilled that he didn't need hand seals to cast his jutsu, using hand seals made it easier on his mind when it came to casting jutsu. Overusing his no-hand seal casting wore him down mentally. Before arriving at this world, he had almost gotten over this weakness, but all that effort was for nothing, as he now had to start over. He could have used 6 paths powers to ignore the weakness, but that would be cheating, and that wouldn't improve his overall abilities. He wasn't in a fight, so he had to improve his base abilities. All in all, his training took a better part of the day, and as such that made him really exhausted, which led to him having a clone take over his academic and financial duties. Then he had to train the peerage in person. The past few days had been awkward, but they had all been able to somewhat rekindle their relationship. All except Akeno. Naruto sighed, waving goodbye to Ravel, who had cleaned up after the boys and bowed to him before leaving to attend to her other duties. "Alright, Boob Dragon Emperor, we have got work to do," he said, getting up and doing a little stretch. Issei nodded, wincing as he stood from his seat and faced Naruto. "Calm down, Dreg. SHHH. SHHH. It's okay," he softly comforted his partner. "Why? Creatures as prideful as dragons must hate it when their titles are parodied." Issei sweat dropped and continued attempting to use comforting words to placate his partner. His kind words fell on deaf ears as the dragon wailed and complained from within its confines in the sacred gear. An audible sigh escaped his mouth as he got into the stance his friend had taught him, spreading his legs shoulder-width apart. Naruto shook his head, and Issei nearly broke his stance in confusion. "Wha?" he asked, tilting his head. "We need to get your body used to the balance breaker," he stated, moving until he was an arm's length away. "Activate it," he commanded. "Wait, but…" When I'm normal, I can hardly maintain it for more than 10 secs. I am super tired right now, and activating it takes time," Issei explained, doing a few stretches in hopes of relieving some of the aches he felt. "Just do it." Naruto slipped his chakra into Issei's body and used Yun release to create a mental connection with the entity residing within the devil. The entity did not resist and allowed the boy to communicate with it in private. "Greg, if I were to offer support to his body, would that increase the time he could maintain his armor?" Naruto lowered his eyes, staring at the crimson gauntlet. Sniffle. "It depends on what you mean by support. Call it a god's blessing if you will. It will just make his body more durable and allow him to recover stamina quicker. In that case, that should increase the time he can maintain his armor. I assume that you intend to have that temporarily in case of emergencies." "That is correct. I can't expect him to be a super devil within a week of training, so I feel like implementing a fail-safe just in case. I would like to use this opportunity to see how I can affect him and sacred gear to allow him to get better from using it." "I see. I will cooperate with you as the time to meet the White One is near." The dragon residing within the boosted gear respected Naruto. It did not know who or what he was, but it knew his strength was incredible. Try as he might hide it, but Drake could still feel the remnants of an aura that felt somewhat divine in nature. The aura that the boy had was overwhelming even when he hid it, but it was practically invisible to lesser creatures, and lesser creatures to him included gods. Drake concluded that the boy's power was at least god class if not more. He felt that antagonizing the boy was not the way to go, but instead working with him was the better option and was more beneficial to him and his host. Naruto trained Issei so he could be able to protect himself and their friends, and that training would be very useful against his rival. Drake observed how attentive Naruto was when it came to Issei's training, and because of that, he trusted him to be careful. The boy had inserted a strange energy into his partner that served to constantly relay information of his body state, allowing him to monitor Issei's progress and stop potential injuries from appearing. "What is this?" "This is strange, the timer has been reduced." "What did he do?" Naruto nodded and stared at Issei's gauntlet for a moment. "What the?" "I kinda feel stronger," Issei announced, staring at his hands with wide eyes. Every ache in his body was absent and his muscles felt like they had a rush of adrenaline, except they didn't. The aches just disappeared, not like he recovered or adrenaline distracted him from them. They were just gone. His muscles felt stronger, like they had been enhanced by some sort of exosuit. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker. "What?" "It hasn't even been a minute yet," Issei screamed internally as his body spontaneously combusted in roaring, swirling flames. The sounds of moving iron synchronized with the flame and various pieces of crimson armor pieces appeared throughout Issei's body. A helmet appeared and covered Issei's head as the armor pieces connected, giving Issei the appearance of a crimson miniature dragon. His tail whipped slightly as a crimson aura slowly and ominously flowed from his body. "Good, it worked," Naruto nodded, feeling the breeze pushing his hair back. "Now, the reason I am having you do this is that I don't want you to save a sudden power-up that will fuck up your senses. You won't have time to adjust during battle, so we'll be fighting here. You and me. Put everything you have learned since you became a devil and you will be fine," he stated, not bothering to enter a guarded stance. The blonde eyed the brunette, watching him adjusting the rush of power coursing through his body. Issei nodded in understanding and crouched before suddenly leaning back in surprise. A sword had lodged itself in front of him. Issei recognized the blade as the one the boy had carried during Ria's rescue. That sword is a poison to me and I hate it, and as such, I can never recognize it as my own and it can never recognize me as its partner. It belonged to one of my greatest enemies. The one who had the balls to take my lover's corpse from its grave. The fact that that sword in front of you is one of the tools he used to cut her open disgusts me," he revealed, sporting a despondent look. "Then why? Why don't you get rid of it then? Why are you having me use it? The master was evil, the sword is not. A fault of mine is being unable to draw a line between it and its previous owner. Its power and usefulness is what drove me to keep it. It is ridiculously sharp and like a sacred gear, its other abilities vary from user to user. I want you to have it say. Protect what is close to you, and if for some reason I am not around, please protect my dear and your fellow servants for me," he spoke softly with shoulders drooping. Is it right to take something that hurt him? Issei tentatively reached out to its snake handle and grasped it and watched the snake transform to a crimson dragon that vaguely resembled Dreg. But still, this will be a great tool to help me in any battle and save lives. He remembered Naruto's lessons that taught him that his sacred gear and weapons he may get on his way up as mere tools. And as much as it was contrary to what he learned, he realized that he can't suddenly increase his strength in a few months, so it was better for him to master his sacred gear and gain more tools. He swore he wouldn't overly rely on the boosted gear and improve himself as a fighter, but he knew that there would be times when the sacred gear would be the only thing that would be able to save him. "I accept it," he said. "If I may, partner." "What's up?" "The sacred gear's functions are meet your desires. I suggest storing the sword within the sacred gear so you may call on it whenever you wish. A benefit to this is that if you are in an anti-magic space, you can still call your weapon," the dragon explained. "Just grasp it and focus on your desire." Issei closed his eyes, his left hand clamping down on his swords. Naruto watched with mild interest as the jewel on the back of Issei's hand glowed before the sword disappeared. Good. Now, from here on out, I am your enemy. Come at me with the intent to kill and make sure I never come after you again," he said, flaring his chakra. The ground below him caved while the training facility's temperature dropped considerably. Issei took a step back, gasping. "What power? Wait, before we begin, as a kid I have always wanted to do this standoff thing, like the Wild West," Issei explained, getting into a stance. Issei's words drew a snort from the steel-faced blonde. Like a river exploding out of a dam, a green ocean-like mat of grass and moss grew from the room's environment with frightening speed. The flat landscape warped and distorted, shrieking as if bones were being shattered and rearranged to meet the perpetrator's desires. Pebbles became towering hills and infertile bedrock bore trees. A small, newly born stream acted as the separating line between the two combatants. Naruto saw no problem with fulfilling Issei's desire, as a battle would likely take place in a flat landscape, such as the previous landscape. He hoped that Issei would try to use terrain to his advantage, but he'd have to wait to see how far Issei could go. Tumbleweeds raced across the battlefield as the sound of wind whipped in their ears. Naruto picked up a pebble and tossed it into the air, drawing Issei's eyes to it. "Come at me with the intent to kill. Use everything you have learned ever since becoming a devil. Is that how you will behave when Asia is in danger?" The pebble remained in the air for what seemed to be an eternity. Issei clenched his hands into a fist and grit his teeth. Thud. Whoosh. So fast. The world around Issei suddenly accelerated as he dashed for his enemy, covering the great distance between them in an instant. The colorful world around him became so heavily blurred that he felt like an infant being subjected to 6 gs of force. The sheer speed he moved at surprised him so much that he almost blacked out right then and there. Erg. Issei tumbled past Naruto, who looked at him somewhat amusedly. Dang it. He didn't even need to move. Okay, maybe going all out when I am completely new to this is a horrible idea. I should just start slow, he thought before getting up to see Naruto blurring through a dozen hand seals. High release. Great fireball, the boy spat out a massive ball so hot that nearby trees caught fire. Issei's reaction was quick as he rolled away, dodging the attack by what felt like an inch. I lost sight of him, he noted. Issei stayed put, allowing his eyes to slowly scan his surrounding. Issei looked to his side and saw a shadow interacting with his, from that angle. The boy turned and threw a right hook. Naruto stood there, holding Issei's gauntlet with one hand, looking at him with approval. Issei, knowing how dangerous his teacher was, didn't let himself sink into excitement, instead fired off a beam of green energy from the gauntlet that had been held. Feeling the energy build up, Naruto let go of his fist while tilting his head, narrowly dodging the attack. Issei sent a series of jabs and kicks at him, watching in frustration as each one was swatted. He ducked under a roundhouse and used a force pulling him down to explode into a sweeping kick which Naruto jumped over. Okay, I can kinda make out images at high speed now, he noted, getting distracted briefly. Naruto distanced himself and weaved hand signs again, much to Issei's horror. Lightning release. Electronic murder. He opened his mouth and released a bolt of electricity that shook the air that surrounded it. Ah. Issei screamed, feeling all his muscles twitch and convulse. Shit. Naruto moved. Issei scrambled to his feet, clumsily blocking attacks from his master. Issei did so well that he expertly caught punches and kicks with his face, effectively staining the brown earth red. Boost. 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 Issei became faster and faster, allowing him to slowly overcome the difference in speed. The two teenagers, just blurs at the point, shook the air as they dashed back and forth. Bashing their fists and legs against each other, wrestling for dominance, shaking the very air itself. He is getting better. Naruto narrowly dodged a punch aimed at his cheek and retaliated with an elbow jab which Issei did not catch with his face this time. Crimson shards littered the floor whilst Naruto's skin remained immaculate, showing who really had control of the battle. The boys' fists met with a jarring jolt, forcing the air around them to explode outwards, shaking the floor around them. Their bodies became crimson and blue blurs, moving forward and ramming into each other before dashing away and repeating. The ocean-colored blur displayed greater agility than the crimson one, peppering it constantly. For every one blow, the red one successfully landed, the blue delivered a dozen more in response. Issei's brain was rattled by the hill drop that delivered to him, reducing his ballistic pace and bringing clarity to his form once more. He crossed his arms over each other, receiving a corkscrew punch before pushing outwards, hoping to break his balance, but Naruto used that momentum to slip into his defenses and deliver a knee to his gut. I am fast, but he is just. He is on another level. Issei grit his teeth, preventing blood from exploding out of his mouth as his body was introduced to another barrage of blows. Issei felt amazing. He felt like he could take on the entire world with his new form. He was super strong and he was super fast, and so nothing could beat him, but that arrogance was swept away quickly. Naruto moved so quickly and was so agile that trying to hit him made Issei feel like a drunk man trying to swat a fly. Dragon shot. Issei punched a green orb that exploded into a beam of light, forcing the blonde to distance himself so he won't get hit. The boy exploded off his feet, jumping and backflipping, casually evading the energy beams exploding beside him. He moved his hands up to his chest and began weaving hand signs. Issei raised a magic circle that successfully blocked jets of water, bolts of lightning, and squalls of wind. He jumped over the collapsing medium and created another one of at mouth area and took a deep breath before spewing a stream of orange flames towards the blonde. Water release. Water formation wall. He willed every semblance of moisture within a few meters of him to coalesce into a wall. The two opposing elements clashed, sending volumes of steam into the air. Not bad, Issei, he thought. He is taking advantage of the room's healing properties, and to do that he needs to delay me. Sucks that I can sense ya, the boy grinned, feeling his hair dance with the rolling steam. But beating up an injured kid isn't fun. He'll bite, I guess. He waited for a moment before turning in a seemingly random direction. Here he comes. Issei activated the jet boosters on his back to propel him away from the innumerable balls of fire descending upon him. Issei's ears twitched and he quickly deactivated his boosters and jumped in the opposite direction, avoiding being turned into a kunai pin cushion. Your eyes are important, yes, but learn to detect changes in the environment with your other senses. Use your ears to listen to the shifting in the air. Use your hair to detect incoming lightning strikes. If something tastes funny, then something is wrong. If something smells off, then it probably is off. If it smells like something flammable, then fire. Just. Don't overuse your eyes, your other senses are there for a reason. Issei took that lesson to heart as he evaded jets of water and blades of wind. My plan has backfired on me. I can't even get close because of that ridiculous magic he is doing. His hand signs. Wait, he said I should approach with the intent to kill, which means that he is my enemy and am allowed to try different cards. Hey Drake, is the. Yes, there is a noticeable pattern between his hand signs and his elemental attacks. From my observation, each element correlates with a specific hand sign. The mist was cleared away by the force of Naruto's relentless attacks. Work with me, please. He'll have a really hard time remembering those at a glance, he requested, sending 3 orbs at 3 globes of waters, cancelling them out. Got it. Fire, Drake announced. Issei rushed directly at Naruto, raising his crimson aura to serve as a second layer to stave off Naruto's attack. High release. Dragon flame bomb. Boost. 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 Issei could feel his body screaming, but he pushed forward. If this was the normal him, he would have collapsed minutes ago, but he had somehow been enhanced by Naruto. The amount of stamina being drained was nothing like the first time he activated it, so he was able to maintain his power for the past 3 minutes. Water. Wind. Earth. Issei outmaneuvered the spears growing from the ground, threatening to puncture his body. He destroyed a jet that spewed from Naruto's with a swing of his arm and maintained his high-speed charge at his teacher. His insides boiled as if to fuel this mad rush, last the vengeance of a man on his stand. The rush was similar to the first attempt at attacking, but this time his mind and eyes had begun adjusting to the new stimuli and allowed him to depict his environment with great clarity. Good. He won't be like I was the time I first became the god of shinobi." The boy winced, reminiscing about how he ran face first into the 10 tails, nearly knocking himself out. It was a good thing the showers of attacks that his allies rained down prevented them from seeing something so awkward. They assumed the 10 tails being sent rolling was an attack when in actuality it was him being unable to control his speed or strength, causing him to ram into the beast with enough force to wreck mountains. High release. Dragon Flame Bomb, he cast the jutsu once more. Issei burst through his dragon-shaped fire attack and raised his hands before bringing them down with great force. Naruto raised his hands in response and had locked his hands with Issei's. He then felt Issei clamping tightly and leaning backward as if desiring to be overpowered. Just what is he doing? He overpowered Issei, pushing him on the ground with enough force to cause the soil to shift. Naruto then leaned back before throwing his head forward like a hammer, only for his eyes to widen in shock as his reflexes took over, forcing him to leap away from Issei. "Bastard. That was a good one," he smiled, moving his hand to wipe his forehead and brought it forward to observe it. It was covered in a crimson, warm, and sticky fluid that slowly drifted from its spot on his forehead. As his healing factor worked to get rid of the poisonous effects of Issei's attack, Naruto looked over to Issei, who was getting up. On his helmet, like a horn growing from a dragon's forehead, Kusanaga's blade grew from it. "What the fuck is with this sword?" he questioned, thinking about how he had been able to harm someone who did not have a scratch after taking an orb of destruction to his face. It's too much," Issei began panting, struggling to push himself off the ground. The armor he wore, which was as light as a sheet of paper, had suddenly become a ton of bricks and his muscles attained the stiffness of lead. Miraculously, he was able to get up to face his teacher. Issei took a single step forward before his armor shattered and was converted into a crimson light before fading. Before he could fall onto his face, he found himself being supported by his buddy. "Good job. I'll take you home so you can rest, you deserve it," he praised with a grin. Issei gave a weak smile before feeling the pull of sleep luring him in. "Thanks. Just as I thought, he can't handle it for very long. I suppose this can be used in case of emergencies," he thought, shooting up to the ceiling with Issei in tow. The boy stood upside down as he sunk into the ceiling, bringing the two to the surface after a moment. Using Yang chakra as a substitute for his stamina works, however his body draws no chakra points, severely hampering the transfer. Let's not even get started on how weak it is. I think using Yang chakra is a bad idea as that may cause his dragonification to accelerate. Rias will be on my ass for that. He slid into an open window, leading him right into Issei's room. "Good evening, Asia." He overdid it again, so please take care of him, he greeted the girl who sat in Issei's room. "Good evening, Naruto-san. Please leave him on the bed," the girl said in halting Japanese. Sure, he did as he was requested and gently placed the unconscious Red Dragon Emperor on his bed. "Ah no. What is it exactly that you do that always renders him unconscious?" This can't be healthy," she expressed her grievances, clutching her fist tightly. "Why does he always have to get to this degree?" She moved to the boy and hovered her hands above his body. The ring on her finger created a green bubble around her hands. Naruto stayed silent, unsure of how to answer as she looked like she was about to burst into tears. He sighed audibly and turned his back to her. "The time of peace is coming to an end with how fallen angels are encroaching into our territory and bringing in unsavory goods with them," he sneered, remembering the absurd holy object he felt entering the town before disappearing suddenly. He had gone to investigate and found fallen angels, but they all had their memories erased. This territory belongs to the Sisters of the Mass, so things can escalate quickly. Whoever is behind this is clever, so until we find clues our best bet is to be as strong as possible, and Issei understands that. That's why he pushes himself to the limit, because he desires to protect all of us, not that I need his protection, Naruto snorted as he reached for the window. "Oh, and Asia, one more thing," he turned to her and stared past her eyes, straight into her soul. The girl gasped, nearly stumbling back as a frosty feeling washed over her entire being. "Issei is okay with always protecting you, but I am not. There is no place for damsels here," he returned to facing the window. "My advice for you is to be like your god. He is said to be good but is very much capable of evil, and the same should go for you. Be ready to do even the most heinous crimes, or else there may be a time where you don't and you will regret it." He raised his hand and pointed at Issei. "He has potential and has to survive to meet it. He most definitely can't get anywhere with bad apples in his group. Everyone has to have a level of strength so he can push himself more. That is all from me. Good evening." He disappeared in wisps of smoke, leaving a frightened Asia on the floor. Asia thought back to when she was in the fallen angel's hands. All she could do was watch as they ruthlessly slaughtered people who forged contracts with devils. She couldn't even offer a semblance of resistance when they strapped her to a cross and extracted the gift which she had received from God to save people. Instead, it would be used to bring harm to them. All she could do was sit around and watch as Issei and the others rushed to the front lines and faced enemies she could never face. She wasn't even good enough to do the only thing she could offer to the team, which was healing. Asia turned slowly and watched Issei's chest rise and fall and closed her eyes, clasping her hands together. "Oh, father," she winced but continued her prayer. "Now then, time for dinner." He rubbed his hands as he leapt through an open window, moving past Ravel, who had already gotten used to her master's antics. Hineko and Riaz had been kind enough to construct a spreadsheet of his behavioral patterns, and with that sheet, Ravel knew when exactly the boy wanted to eat, which windows he preferred jumping through, and which days he felt like going through the door. "Welcome home, master," she greeted as retreating back. "Sir," he waved as he rushed past the massive entrance to his home and ran upstairs and took a left, running past a well-decorated hall. He opened the door to his room and rushed for his chair. "My limited edition porno is here. Let's go," he cheered as Ravel followed closely behind him. "Excuse me." She entered the room, her face red as she gently placed a plate of beef Wellington and a side of fries on his desk. He didn't pay her any mind as his eyes scrolled over the naked bodies of women on the page. After hearing the sound of pouring stopping, he reached out and casually lifted the glass of wine and tipped it into his mouth. The sweet flavor tickled his taste buds before slipping into his throat. He gently swirled the glass whilst staring at the magazine, giving him the impression of a sophisticated scholar. Though that image was spoiled by the woman bending over and showing off her assets. Master. Master. What are you doing? Reading a porno, what else? But that's inappropriate. How would Lady Riaz feel? Probably disgusted or something, he responded easily before taking another sip at his drink. But if you have a problem with it, then strip so I can fuck you right here and now. Then at least I won't read the mags. That's even worse. Excuse me." Ravel dashed out the room, not realizing that she did not offer her master ice or give him chopsticks. Naruto was a weirdo that preferred eating European food with chopsticks. The boy chuckled at her adorable red face before creating chopsticks with wood release and slicing the Wellington with wind chakra. He lifted a piece to his mouth and smiled. "Since when did I eat like a noble?" he questioned. Who knew doing the most morally questionable thing would be so pleasant? The steak practically melted onto his taste buds. "Well. Not like I have done morally unsound stuff before. Oh well," he shrugged, putting away his book in favor of enjoying the mouth-watering steak. He picked up a chip and plopped it into his mouth. "So crunchy," he stated approvingly before picking another one up and dipping it into a dark sauce, then did not smell familiar. "Bruh, the sauce. Holy shit, this girl is goated like bruh. Brew." As Ravel dashed away from her master's room, red at the face at high speed. The girl started slowing down, realizing her blunder. "My," she said, placing her hand on her chin. The girl's expression was mildly relaxed, if not for the slight twitches and a bit of sweat on her temple. Will he be upset? She re-entered the room with shaking shoulders, expecting to be harshly berated, but contrary to her expectation the boy paid her no mind, focusing on his magazine whilst chewing on something. She watched him reach for a chip and lower it into an empty container, hitting it with a dull clunk. He frowned and turned to her. "Ravel, get more of the sauce please." "It's fantastic," he requested, practically making puppy eyes. He plopped it into his mouth and closed his mouth, as if vibing the crunching noises that came from it. He reached for another chip and dunked it into the empty container again and frowned. The girl couldn't help but smile at the amusing scene, because watching someone capable of extreme focus kept forgetting there was nothing in the container. "Oh of course," she said before rushing out of the room. "I've swap. In all honesty, I have nothing to complain about. I made the deal and paid for it. I am no longer a noble, just a simple slave girl serving an enigmatic human. Growing up, I have heard numerous stories of people getting introduced to unpleasant environments as soon as they became slaves. Elder brother and I also happened to witness such happening in foreign territories, and it disgusted me. Seeing that led to me interacting more with the maids and manservants that worked in our home, and that exposed me to much more. I gained a lot from them, such as my ability to do any form of housework and the ability to appreciate the smaller things in life. They were uneasy at first, but we eventually got along, and we conversed often. I considered them my friends, and because of that I sometimes helped them with chores when I was free and no one was watching us. I may have gotten along with them and helped them, but I never was truly in their shoes, so when the time came for me to start serving my master, I realized how horrid things could be. I remembered how other devils, including my father, treated their servants. At least my father is kind, but my master is not. Fighting him when he came to rescue Lady Riaz and listening to him speak during the meeting, watching him play mother and father into his hands like a cruel puppeteer. He was just terrifying. I was so afraid of him to the point that death felt like mercy. Watching the darkness creeping up my skin nearly tore my heart out. A darkness that was followed by an indescribable pain that could only be caused by a throng of ailments and curses. My master conjured them with ease, and his mastery over this darkness completely overwhelmed my clan's famous regeneration. A power so strong that our warriors could blindly rush into battle without any worries of death. Even an item that is created by my clan, the Phoenix Tear, is completely ineffective against his curse. I understand just how easily he can kill me, and that makes me feel vulnerable in the sense that he can do as he wishes and I would not be able to retaliate in any way. But still, I understood this when I made the deal. For my elder brother's life and his future happiness, this sacrifice was worth making. At a glance, Master is a person who has no real sense of morality and justice and would do just whatever conveniences him. I expected to be constantly shouted at as I made mistakes and beaten down to an inch of my life should I have failed, but my expectations couldn't be further from the truth. He isn't at all like I expected. He is a strange yet fairly normal teenager. When playing that Call of Duty game on his console, he rages and raves, saying extremely inappropriate things and accuses people of cheating when in reality he got outplayed. Humans call this behavior being salty, I believe. He indulges in a lot of pornographic material and does not even bother hiding it, and he hardly cleans his room, not that he needs to as he has me now. And that's the strange thing, despite the fact that he has me to do all the housework, he still does some of the chores himself. Just the other day, I had to remind him that I was the maid and he did not have to clean up after himself. Though I haven't had an unpleasant experience these past few days, I still have the feeling that interacting with him is like exploring an ancient ruining riddled with booby traps. One wrong step and he won't hesitate to kill me. Living in the same building as him does horrors for my mental state. I can't sleep peacefully, knowing that the monster that nearly killed my brother rests in the room above mine. I can't sleep peacefully with the knowledge that the very same force of nature that nearly killed me would have done the same to my entire family if they continued antagonizing him. I should be insomniatic, but when I go to bed I always feel safe, like the warmth of the sun is cradling me and singing lullabies into my ears, lulling me in nightmare-less slumbers. The conflict I feel is nearly unbearable. The boy that screams profanities at his television. The boy that gently tends to the verdures in the garden. The boy that lets a white cat rest on his lap whilst he affectionately strokes her ears, displaying a strong feeling of satisfaction as she nuzzles his hand. The boy that. He is. They can't possibly be the same person. Can they? I sometimes fail to remember how horrible he is and instead choose to recognize the more clumsy and gentle-natured version of him. Sometimes. I feel as though remembering how horrible will make me descend into madness, so this is my only option. I can feel his power flowing through me, maintaining the contract that is our bond. I want to accuse it of whispering to me and threatening me with the most horrid tortures in existence, but. It doesn't. It's just there, laying dormant like it was never meant to be awake anyways, but. In the end, there is nothing I can do. There is no escape from my fate, so all I can do is make the most of what I have now. Which is nothing. Master, I have your sauce. She walked up to him and presented him with the substance he desired. The boy nodded in approval, taking the sauce and placing it on the table before dipping one of his chips into it and chomping away. So cute, slave of mine. Yes, master. How goes your work? How is everything? Are you adapting well to your new living conditions? If you rent, I can make arrangements to lessen the strain. He questioned, shifting his legs into a cross position. My adaptation has gone well, master. As you may have noticed, I have experience in domestic chores and as such adapting was not too difficult. My only issue is the sheer scale of the mansion, but I have solved that issue through dividing it into quadrats and through the use of magic, she answered honestly. I see. That's good to know, he said before taking his attention to his poor magazine in his hands. Ravel had a look of contemplation as she rubbed her knees against each other and made herself look smaller. Master. What? The sound of a page turning permeated through the room. What are your goals for the future? Now why would you ask me something like that? It's a servant's duty to know their master's plans so that they can prepare to meet those goals, she explained, shuffling slightly. I see. My goals vary as time passes, however the theme they consistently share is related to peace. I just want to have peaceful life. He trailed, his eyes not leaving the seductive images in his grasp. Peaceful. The deafening silence that followed weighed heavily on her heart. The girl bit her lower lip before stepping back and slowly shuffling away from him, inching towards the door. Excuse me, I will be taking my leave, she said hurriedly before turning. Dishes? Oh. Of course, she rushed to his side and collected his clean plate and rushed out the room. Naruto closed his magazine with a light thud and sighed. Now where might I find a devil with fallen angel origins, I wonder. The boy produced a slip of paper from his pocket and wrote, "Went out to bully Ria's kids." With his message written, a puff of smoke appeared before vanishing, revealing the space he had occupied was now empty. Stars illuminated the path that was a fair distance from the nearest road. It was unnaturally smooth, having no coarse or sharp rocks or jagged thorns that could tear through one's shoes. The sound of crumbling leaves permeated from his feet, combining with the various sounds of the forest's inhabitants. He could hear the distant call of an owl, the scampering of a group of rabbits and a weasel lurking in the trees above them. The bland path soon transitioned into a stone-paved way which would lead its follower to the top of one of the mountains that surrounded Kuo. The light breeze tickled the blades of grass that flowed freely through the land, occasionally being crammed in between rocks in some places. The distant town was blocked by thickets and foliage, allowing for separation between mankind and nature. Naruto casually hopped over the stone stairs, passing through the shadows cast by the falling dancing leaves and torii gates, and finally arrived at a large open space that was a Shinto temple. To think you would come here. By the cold shoulder Akeno, aren't you pleased to see your master? He turned and regarded the Yamato Nadeshiko. She was dressed in a white haori with red accents, a red hakama, and a pair of zori with white tabi. You could learn a lot from Ravel, he smiled. The girl gave no answer to his remark, instead narrowed her eyes. What do you want? Ain't I hung with a buddy of mine I wonder? Perhaps I desire to sate my lust with your body. Perhaps I just came to annoy you, he responded cheekily, moving his hand to lightly scratch his whiskered cheek. His sigh traveled through the air as his shoulders drooped at her silence. She isn't fun anymore. I want to settle things between us. I am sorry. Bara. What might you be talking about I wonder? Her voice was pleasant, but the look in her eyes was not. Akeno looked to be an inch away from entering an attack phase to get rid of him. I'm sorry, he repeated lowering his head, I have no excuse for allowing that shit to happen when I easily could have stopped it. Naruto still felt like beating himself for his weakness of being unable to summon his powers simply because of his past. His past was over, all he had to do was look into the future, but he cold. He just cold. He was pathetic. Yes, I see. But that still doesn't change the fact that you were very much aware of what you were doing. Lying to us your friends, allowing your significant other to suffer when you could have stopped it, she responded causing him to flinch slightly. Correct me if I am wrong but isn't it hypocritical for you to be like this to me? I mean, you have holy powers which are highly effective against devils. That bomb queen should be no match for you, what held you back? Akeno visibly winced at his assertion before leveling a glower at him, you don't know anything about me. All you see is the beautiful, sadistic Wani-san. You are a monster. You allowed this torture to be brought onto us and Ria's. Do you have any idea how many times she has cried, hoping that one day she could be free to do as she wishes and marry who she loves? Akeno's face contorted, her voice becoming more and more acerbic. We all thought you were just a human. Someone to be protected from the supernatural at all costs and that eventually evolved into a relationship. A relationship that was a lie. A lie, her voice withered in a sorrowful whisper. The boy was riddled with numerous conflicting emotions as he listened to her words. He bit the bottom of his lip slightly and crossed his arms whilst forcing his eyes to stay on hers. Even if I lied to you, our relationship is very much real. I love all of you, he started giving her a weary smile. I was pretty much depressed and set on living out the rest of my natural life alone, but you were all there for me. You held me and valued my beliefs and ideas and my personality, and that was not fake to me. At this point you are my family, he continued, seating himself on the ground and propping his knee up, allowing his forearm to rest on it. Yet you didn't bother, she the sweltering rage in her heart going into overdrive. Despite his words, his facial expression remained neutral. He was doing one of the things that irritated her the most, saying things whilst not allowing his body to express his feelings. I know that I could have done something but. Please don't forget that I am human just like you. Ah, wait. No, but you get the idea. I have emotions too, my own past and most definitely my own faults. His stoicism faded and his eyes became droopy. His appearance completely betrayed what she knew of him before the events with Riser. He always seemed full of life and energy, but now he looked like a wet diseased dog nearing its death. But. She tried reasoning, but the words could no longer form. The conversation had been so short yet he had already managed to corner her and catch her tongue. Akeno. You and I are very similar and you recognize it. You mirror yourself onto me and because of that I ask you, why do you hate yourself so much? His words were sharper than the edge of katana, slicing through her heart. Akeno's eyes went wide, feeling as if she had been shot through the chest. She stumbled backward, touching her chin, why? She muttered. She averted her gaze, attempting to hide the glassy texture her eyes began attaining. Akeno could no longer look him in the eye, nor maintain the hostility that she had displayed when they met. His ability to see right through her frightened her, making her feel vulnerable. She began reminiscing about her past, bringing a dark cloud onto her heart. The black water she kept dammed up cracked the concrete wall that kept it imprisoned. He pushed himself off the ground and moved his hand to cup her cheek. Akeno watched his hand slowly approach her. The hand resembled an oasis for a dehydrated man in a desert. A godsend, something without any imperfections. Akeno leaned in slightly, feeling her heart racing as it approached, but as she was about to close her eyes the hand's visage shifted. It became larger and more calloused, like a man she had in her life that she remembered very well. The man who had been with her since her conception and spoiled her rotten as she grew up. A rough-looking man who went to great lengths to make sure his wife and daughter lived under a roof and had good food to eat. A man of quite literal power who guarded his family against their enemies and past enemies. A man who stayed consistent not only because he was obligated to, but because he wanted to. All his heart desired was their safety until one day he failed. The failure that would create a rift between him and his daughter. No. Don't touch me, you are just like him. Naruto's body suddenly had thousands of volts of electricity coursing through it, singing his clothes. The sudden attack did not deter his hand's approach as if glided through the air. Akeno stood transfixed before feeling an inexplicable rage exploding from her heart. Another bolt of lightning struck him. And another. And another until she couldn't anymore. Her attempts were unsuccessful as he sported no physical injury. His shirt had long since burnt away and his pants had miraculously survived her onslaught. She felt a rough hand grazing her cheek, overriding the moist warm feeling that was present. You are beautiful, he said with great conviction. No. Yes. No. Yes. No mphhh. Akeno fell limp into his arms, unable to bring herself to push him away. Her eyes closed, focusing on the warmth on her mouth. Any form of resistance had disappeared at that point and she just cold. Tears flowed freely from her eyes as leaned into arms and savored the kiss. He pulled back, watching a stream of saliva act as a connection to their lips. Let's talk, okay, he gave her a warm smile before taking her hand. Akeno absent-mindedly allowed him to lead her back into the temple. Yes, she whispered, matching his steps as they entered the building. Naruto and Akeno knelt at a table, with them on the opposite sides of the table facing each other. I don't want you to make the same mistake as me, he locked his eyes with hers. I can understand how you feel, which is why I am here. To help you, he expressed, feeling a bit of nervousness making its way into his psyche. He clenched his fist slightly and focused on Akeno, who moved to wipe her tears. Black feathers exploded from behind Akeno, temporarily masking the raven-like wing protruding from her back. Another wing emerged from behind her, one that closely resembled that of a bat with its leathery frame. Akeno watched him closely, feeling trepidation as she predicted a disgusted response. He sipped on a Mountain Dew like he did on a normal day. I'm a fallen angel. I am half. I was a fallen and. He nodded, not keeping his words to him to allow her to express herself better. He listened as she attempted to explain the circumstances of how her family was created, with her mother falling in love with her father. She told him how her clan, one of the 5 principal clans of Japan, did not approve of their relationship and attempted to separate them numerous times. The clan attempted to kill Baraquiel to get to the mother and daughter, but they were continuously defeated by the cadre, so they waited for the moment he was away. They killed Akeno's mother in front of her, and that led to her developing a hatred for fallen angels. Her father arrived too late and Akeno rejected him, then fled. Her hatred for her father's species was brooded by the fact that her clan considered her a disgrace and actively hunted her to get rid of her before the Shinto gods became aware of her. Feelings of abandonment coupled with severe shaming and hatred. Really rough on a child's mind. He did not change his facial expression, but he did feel irritation. Perhaps they were more similar than he thought. He reached out and grasped her hand tenderly, giving her a comforting look. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise when Akeno mentioned Heinrich Agrippa, recalling from history texts he had studied some time ago. Just how old was Serziches exactly? Well, that didn't matter at the moment, so he focused on Akeno. Man. He started, scratching the back of his head with uncertainty as to what or how he should respond to that. That shit is deep, he continued, drawing a giggle from Akeno. That was Naruto she very familiar with. She couldn't help but giggle at his statement, this guy. She couldn't help but laugh a bit, expressing the problems that stayed buried in her heart had done wonders for her state of mind. She felt unbelievably relieved that he had no concern with what she was. He expressed no form of distaste, dislike and disgust at her hybrid features, and she felt accepted. Her cheeks gained a light hue as she recalled the texture of his lips, leading to her placing her hands on his own. The blonde closed his eyes, placing an elbow on the table and pushing his cheek onto the palm of his hand. All I can say is, I don't feel like your father is at fault. The temperature of the room dropped once more, but Akeno stayed silent. Even if he had a duty as your father and your family's protector, he is still a high-ranking member of one of the most powerful factions in the world. Him neglecting his duties would likely be catastrophic, he explained. He opened his eyes, not at their normal width, instead he kept them narrowed as he spoke. Your clan waited until your father was gone, and I am sure they had no way of knowing that unless an internal within the Watchers leaked it. Your father is thousands of years old, so he should easily be able to find forms of spying with relative ease due to the amount of knowledge he racked up over the years. You were set up, he stated his theory. I may be wrong, but I think you should talk to your father if you meet him again. I am sure he really loves you. He squeezed her hand. Akeno took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. Would you be there with me when I meet him? Of course, he responded, causing a bright smile to grace Akeno's features. Would you be there for us when we need you? Naruto shook his head, causing her to recoil in shock. I am not an all-powerful god. I can't predict the future and I may make mistakes. That is why I am pushing so hard for you to get stronger, because I want you to be able to fight in the event I am unable to help you. I did not fall for a damsel, he smirked, looking into her eyes. Fall for? Akeno blushed slightly as she gazed into the ocean that was his eyes. Akeno sighed in exasperation before shaking her head, giggling. He smiled softly, watching her beautiful features expressed happiness. Thank you, she said before standing and moving to his side and kneeling beside him. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Stay with me, she wrapped her arms around his arm, enveloping into the immaculate softness that was her breasts. She leaned in and claimed his lips once more before back rubbing herself onto him. Sure, I can let a clone train Issei and Kiba. Ah, looks like Asia wants to join too. I can telepathically communicate with my clones, and he just told me he is going to get Kiba first, then go grab Asia and Issei, he explained. Akeno gave a weak smile before yawning. She stood up, taking his hand and pulling him along. Please clean us up, she requested, and in that instant, all odors that wafted off them disappeared as if they had taken a bath. Wait, you can actually do that. Ara, she said in surprise. Yeah. Winged it, didn't ya? He laughed. I can create chemicals and compounds and stuff, just destroyed the nasties and made it go away with moisture on the surface of the skin before remoisturizing, he explained. Naruto's clothes faded and were replaced with blue onises with bunny ears. Oi, don't look at me like that, they are comfortable, he huffed. Akeno giggled before gaining a teasing look. And here I thought you would want to push me down and violate me, her innocent smile gave predatory vibes. Maybe later, he shrugged before jumping into the bed. Besides, I don't think you're ready for that, he continued, causing her to sigh in disappointment. After seductively changing into a nightgown, she joined him within the bed. Naruto proceeded to wrap his arms around her and pull her in, forcing himself to stay under control, as his nose was invaded by her intoxicating scent. Naruto. He was pulled out of his thoughts by her pleasant voice. Thank you. For everything, and I am sorry. He smiled and said nothing, instead pulling her closer and placing his hand on her head. You are important to all of us, so please don't push yourself too hard, we will all get worried. We are able to confide in you, but you aren't able to confide in us, so if you ever have problems. We will be here for you. I will be here for you, she said as her voice faded off, leaving the boy awake. That's sweet of you, but I'm still a shinobi. A man who has walked down the path of war and spilled the blood of countless people. A man responsible for the suffering of countless, and a man who unjustly changed the very structure of the world just suit to his desires. Was it fair? Of course not. If I tried telling you about the person I used to be, the thing I used to be, then I am afraid you might turn away from me. I suppose I can keep this a secret. All my enemies are dead in another dimension, so they can't tell a soul. I don't particularly regret some things I have done, but I know that they are all morally unacceptable. I know peace is impossible, so me being a shinobi is the only thing I can be for all of you. I'll gladly walk the path of war if I am able to help you live happily without any worry of what the world will drop on us. As protectors of our villages and our countries, we are expected to eliminate threats before they even come, even if that means slaughtering a country of innocents. No humans enjoy this, so we have to take one for the team and hold it in, because if we take it out, we will destroy everything around us. I hate myself and some crimes I have committed, but I can't really change my past. All I can do is look to the future, and my future is being a shinobi. We are so inhuman that having feeling makes us feel extremely vulnerable. I feel vulnerable, but you guys make me feel safe. I'll do what I can for you. I'll suffer again if I must. We suffer, we endure, and we persevere. We are shinobi, I am a shinobi, and shinobi don't cry, we bleed. But the clone, after hearing Naruto's thoughts, it audibly sighed. Are you okay, Uzumaki-san? Yeah, I'm good, Asia. Let's that perv out of his room, we got a lot of work to do. Naruto's ear twitched and he raised an eyebrow as he heard heavy panting. It did not come with a wet smacking he would expect from Issei, so assumed he was just watching normal porn. He should know that right now is training time, let's have a little fun, he thought, holding back a grin at the thought of Asia covering her mouth in shock as Issei watched porn. Naruto grabbed the door handle, twisted, and pushed. Drop your pants, soldier. I am gonna show you why they call me the drill sergeant. Issei was on a chair eating half a sandwich whilst his pants were down. The other half was. Explained the strange smell of lotion mixed with PB&J. Oh my god, Naruto thought as he and Issei made eye contact. Issei's eyes flicked onto Asia, who looked like she had seen a ghost. Asia suddenly felt dizzy and she collapsed onto the floor with a dull thud, with Naruto not even bothering to catch her. Wait, I can explain, this isn't what it looks like. The sound of a whip and a zip echoed through the room, followed by the groaning of a man. Naruto didn't even want to know what the hell was on that screen. Naruto. I want you to take my virginity. I can't explain right now, but all I can say is that I love you. I am certain that I want you and you alone. Her mouth spoke each with enthusiasm and a not so subtle hint of desperation. Naruto, eyes wide, watched her launch herself towards him, prompting him to spread his arms to pull her into his embrace. He underestimated the force of her tackle, so his eyes were reacquainted with the ceiling and strands of her blood-red hair. With his body immobilized under her, Riaz dragged her face and chest up his toned stomach like a serpent before raising her head and obscuring his vision of the ceiling with her face and hair. Everything became unbearably hot, her loins felt as though someone were pressing a soldering iron onto them, causing them to secrete copious amounts of lubricative fluids. She slowly humped him, her hips rocking back and forth, spreading her nectar over his stomach as she gazed into eyes with her loving and lustful one. Each time she moved her hip, more and more resistances, particularly friction, became a thing of the past. Naruto laying beneath her gave no response, mouth agape, not from her words, but from the message communicated by her eyes. They told him that she would never see him, so she wanted to make the most of it. They told him that most of what she had in her mind were his best interests, as she always did. These feelings were hidden by the veil exuded by lustful aura that would shame that of even Succubi. MPHHGGG, his attempt at speaking was denied when she swooped in for the kill. Her lips were pressed firmly against his, voiding any attempt at speaking, and tightened, as if they did not want another word to slip out of them. Her left hand pressed down in his chest, immobilizing him whilst her right hand slowly inched to his pants waistband. He raised his hand and planted it firmly onto her fine ass before jerking his body and turning with her in tow, reversing their positions. It was now him on top and her below him. There was now silence, nothing dared to make a noise as Naruto gazed into Ria's eyes with worry. Ria's plentiful heaving chest slowed as she stared back at him with moist eyes, almost pleading for him to lose control of himself. What's wrong? A simple question was uttered, breaking the silence monopolized by heavy pants. The finality in his words nearly crushed any hope she had. Get into his room. Seduce him. Give him her virginity before suppressing his memories and secretly watching over him so Rizer doesn't try any foul plays. It was supposed to be simple. But contrary to her expectations, Naruto raised a wall and blocked his lust from reaching her. She could feel the desire in his eyes, swirling like a storm that would make any fierce beast run for the hills and pray it doesn't find, but he dared no surrender to it. The sin that seduced countless men of iron will and forced them to submit into its pleasurable will. The sin that was capable of swaying even the purest of beings, turning them into creatures more fiendish than the most black-hearted of devils. Lust perpetuated greed and pride, two things no man can claim to have ever lived without. It should have been easy. He was denying his desires, refusing to allow himself to go to the point of no return out of concern for her. Just like he always did, sacrificing something that would raise his self-image, pride and happiness out of concern for her. He had an erection, but that was a mere physiological response that did not at all reflect what was going on in his heart and mind. She immediately lost her words, so she instead focusing all her willpower on looking straight into his eyes to be as transparent as possible. There is a reason, but the primary one is that I love you and I want you, so we can do this the easy way or the hard way, she tried, joking only to wince under Naruto's unflinching gaze. I never really have done anything for you, you know. I am always putting you in danger just by being next to you because you never know who could attempt to get to me or my brother. You may say I give you a lot of money, but you never really liked money. You always the type of man that prefers only having the necessary amount. I remember everything you have done for me, like the time you hacked my Instagram and doxed him. I didn't like that, but I know you did it because you love me. I remember the time I caught a flu that can only affect devils and you kept skipping work just to, delaying progress on all projects you wanted to release. There was that one time we entered a carrot cake eating contest. I know how much you hate carrots, but you soldiered on and won it when I couldn't continue. I remember when you kicked me into a murky pond just because other men were looking at me. You are quite the naughty boy. She closed her eyes and gave him her most dazzling slime before opening them once more. At the very least, let me sate your lust while I still can, she said before taking advantage of her superior strength as devil to break his grip, causing him to fall towards her. Rhea spread her arms out wide and used one to wrap itself around his waist and the other to tenderly grasp his cheek. She took his lips while pulling him down on top of her. While she still can, those words caused Naruto's spirit to fracture, creating a gap in his defense. What's going on? Is she dumping me? No, she isn't unless. Ria's eyes were closed as Naruto reciprocated the kiss, missing the narrowing of his eyes. Missing the frost that crawled into them, a complete dichotomy to what she knew about him. He refused to show her his far darker side, and seeing her eyes close caused his self-control to shatter. Is it that phoenix air? He thought to himself, desperately keeping a grip on his killing intent. His chakra may have been gone, but his will and his aura as the god of shinobi remained. It was imperceptible unless he allowed it to slip, and even if he did, only races with extremely tight connections to chakra would be able to detect it, making it possible for higher-level yokai to detect it. His killing intent had enough potency to drive an experienced jonin mad, making them seek the furthest corner from Naruto and cry and hope he isn't found. "Naruto, please," she muttered, snapping him out of his reverie. Her sweet voice tickled his ears and gently soothed the aches in his heart and mind. His hot breath caused the heat on her lower stomach to raise, drawing out heavy pants out the devil. His crystalline eyes reflected a girl whose face was melted by desires and eyes damp with lust. Her immaculate skin had taken a pinkish hue, slightly flushing it. The complacent former shinobi tentatively traced his hand from her knee and had it crawl from her thigh and edge toward her skirt. His callous hands caused Ria's to tense up and moan as electricity shot up from her spine from the sudden ministrations. He wasn't even touching her crotch, yet she felt all her rationality slipping from intense pleasure. Stop teasing me," she complained internally before jerking her hip slightly in an attempt to get his hand to touch her crotch. Naruto saw this coming and gracefully guided his hand away from her before pressing the palm of his hand onto her pelvis. His hand was curled a half fist when he did this, allowing him to initiate the next part of his plan. The amount of lust radiating from Ria's was so obscene that humans without a sense for the supernatural would catch it, and the scent. The scent welcomed him, it called for him. "If just touching your thighs did this to you, then how about this," he thought before uncurling his index finger while keeping his hand firmly pressed onto her. The finger being uncurled slowly pulled the shirt neatly tucked into her skirt while slowly pulling her skirt down. Stop it," she complained. He took his time, but she was ignored. When Naruto finished, her drooling second mouth was still covered by her skirt, but said skirt had moved to reveal most of the area above it. After that he left that part alone and focused on her chest. His hand flew to the back of her head and gripped it before pulling her face closer and taking her lips. With his free hand, he latched onto one of her twin mountains with overwhelming mass and volume before squeezing roughly and kneading them, eliciting a whimper from the devil. Said hand then moved to her cleavage and slowly drew a line from her breast to her diaphragm to her belly button before gently rubbing her pelvis. His other hand left her head and latched onto her other breast before feeling for its nipple through her shirt and brassiere. It shifted slightly, allowing for his fingers to caress one of her buttons. Flick. One of her buttons flew off and landed elsewhere with a dull thud after failing to resisting Naruto's flick. Another one joined it and one last followed, revealing the black lacy brassiere hiding the magical chest from him. Rias watched with great trepidation as his hand reached to the gap in her shirt, only for the hand to suddenly change direction yet again and found itself on the back of her neck. "Found it? On? How did you?" Rias exclaimed when Naruto casually found her erogenous zone. He leaned forward and licked the nape of her neck, causing Ria's body to contort under him, only being restrained by his weight. He pulled away so that his face was a few inches away from her neck, allowing Ria's to calm her pounding heart. Don't play with me, you idiot. Just go for it. Go for it." She shivered, feeling his hot breath on the nape of her neck. The hand that was on her head slid down to the back of her neck before drawing a semicircle around it before stopping at the button that helped multiple others keep her shirt on. It was time for it to join the trio that departed much earlier. Click. 1. Click. 2. Oh Satan. As Naruto worked to undress her as if he were peeling the most pleasant fruit in the world. He did not hurry to get her clothes off, instead he took his time to enjoy all her flavors with his eyes, imprinting every curve on her into his mind. His hand occasionally brushed against her bountiful breasts and caressed her narrow waist, examining her like a person looking at gorgeous sculpture and wanted to see every part of it. Locking her desires briefly, Rias promptly used her magic to remove all of his clothing to keep a sense of urgency. He had to hurry or else time would be lost. Naruto, understanding, raised his hand and brought it down to her bottom, drawing a small yelp from the heiress. He put his hand on her pelvis and gripped her skirt and black lacy panties before yanking them off. He foresaw her closing her legs, so he placed his knee between them before they could bar his entry into her. After a moment of Naruto massaging her thighs and calves gently, Rias finally relented and allowed her legs to spread with a bright red face. This was much different from bathing. Before she could close her eyes, it happened. His hand plunged into her honey pot, causing her unprepared body to jerk upwards. It was surprising that Naruto managed to keep her firmly pressed onto the bed considering he was human, but logic was long gone at this point. Rias let a sensual moan, encouraging Naruto, who was carpet bombing her collar with kisses, moving down to her toned stomach. His hands then moved up, groped and fondled her plump milker's mine. He thought as he worked for his hands on her large tits before allowing her pink hardened areola to slip in between his middle and index finger. He leaned forward and licked her nipples, causing her to arc her back in response, shivering in pleasure as he moved to suck her teats. Her dripping snatch was practically drooling as he rubbed his hardened member between her labia, mixing his pre-ejaculate with her nectar and spreading it over her clit like in a PB&J sandwich, teasing her clit. Like a hot dog far too big for the buns, Naruto spread her labia far and allowed for the barrel of the one-eyed snake to take licks at her bean. He wasn't just humping her, he was multitasking with him, suckling her teat and massaging the other with his free hand. They were soft like pillow and pleasant to grasp like loaves of bread, except without the gaps and a lot more fleshing. The feeling was addictive, but Naruto remembered that in as much as he liked her breasts, that was not her erogenous zone. He then stopped suckling on her boob and assaulted her neck with a series of kisses, licks and suckles, and received mewls and moans in return. His hand then went down, rubbed her plump ass, grabbing it and pulling her closer, and looked into her eyes. He stopped all his attacks, causing the heat in the room to diffuse elsewhere, leaving a cool and pleasant atmosphere with light puffs. "Riaz, before I do this, I just want to ask and make sure. Am I worth it? Are you sure you want to lose that to me?" He asked coolly with a gaze that warned her that there no going back should they cross the line. He understood that girls, even devils, valued their chastity, so losing it was something that was usually memorable and significant to them. After this was done, there was no going back. Going to places like Hera's sacred baths could reverse it, but that didn't change the fact that she would be giving her first time to him. Riaz strengthened her resolve and stared right into his crystal-like blue eyes, with slight tear droplets forming at the corner of her eyes. "I love you," she didn't say more, instead she leaned closer to him and pressed her forehead against his, surrendering herself to him. The notion that Naruto wasn't worth it wasn't even a joke to her, it was a serious offense. After everything he did for her, all the memories he made with her. It could only be him. Rizer was not taking it. Over her dead body. Over her eviscerated soul. No one else was taking it but him. It belonged to him and him alone, therefore, only he could take it. "I love you too, after this is done, I will correct my silly mistake. I won't let you or the others get hurt anymore," he reciprocated aloud and kept the second part to himself. His blue eyes shimmered briefly, far too quick for Riaz to take notice. This was no time for him to guilt trip himself anymore, so as soon as they were done, he would tell her. No more secrets. She never kept anything from him, but he kept over 3 decades worth of bloodshed from her. But that brought the question. Would she still accept him? It didn't matter, she deserved the truth, but the thought made him reconsider what he was about to do. He knew that with the way devils typically act, there would be bloodshed if he acted. This bloodshed will then cause a moment of weakness, which will likely cause other factions to attack weakened devils. That wouldn't do it all, because despite what her parents and house had put her through, he knew that she still loved them. Her brother was the great demon Lord Lucifer, and so it was a given that he would join battles. Naruto's past experience told him that no matter how powerful someone is, they can still be killed if the right approach is used. Just like one of his shinobi god predecessors, Senju Hashirama. Naruto almost shook his head at his worries, his power was worth countless armies of elite shinobi. Just one experienced shinobi far exceeded Riaz and her group, and Naruto could take on many armies without a scratch. He had power. He would at least take responsibility by guarding the devils until they recover. After guiding her to bend over the bed by her tailbone, he stood behind, sailing full mast as he took an eyeful of Ria's dripping pussy. After that, he wasted no time grabbing his shaft and lubricating its bulbous head by rubbing it against her snatch before slowly entering, creating sticky sounds as their reproductive organs made contact. He groaned slightly at the familiar feeling, it was nothing like his hand. He felt no bones, instead he only felt dozens of muscles rubbing and massaging every inch of the top part of his member. The contractions of her muscles in conjunction with her wetness made his dick feel as if it was both unwelcome and welcome in her vagina. The muscles mostly forced him out and drew him in a little, allowing for a mind-blowing experience as he continued sinking his member into her cunt, inch by inch. He ignored the barrier and broke past it because he had already confirmed that she wanted it. As Naruto entered her maidenhood, Ria's eyes went wide as she felt herself stretching to accommodate his size. She knew that he was large, but she underestimated how well she'd take it. As it pushed further within her, it broke in her hymen, wetting the penis and the vagina in blood and arousal fluid. In one thrust, she felt like all air had been forced out of her lungs, so she let out a choking sound, but she didn't dare move away in response. Instead, she raised her hips and attempted to fuck herself on his member, only to be restrained again. Naruto leaned in from behind her and wrapped his arms around her before nuzzling his face into her hair. "Don't do this to yourself. Now is the time to relax and enjoy," he whispered, calming the intense guilt in her heart. It was clear to him that this was an act of punishing herself. He cold let her do that to herself. She nodded as warm tears from the pain trailed down her cheeks before relaxing, tightly clasping the bed sheets to help cope. His member was large and so it wasn't suited for virgins. Ria's doing that to herself could have traumatized her, and this was her first time. Losing one's virginity to someone they love was important in the world he was in, and so he did his best to make it as special as possible. It's an honor, Ria's gremmery, the overwhelming pride he felt slightly alleviated the depression seated at his heart. He took a moment to appreciate the extremely warm, moist and tight cave his member had filled up. They were one. They felt an instinctual connection forming between them, one that allows them to communicate with the slightest of gestures. Naruto was a former shinobi, he could read her perfectly, but her body language added further clarity. Her tenseness faded with the pain, and she didn't have to tell him to move. He already knew, and so he slowly rocked his hips, drawing a moan from the devil. His slow rocking of the hips slowly accelerated, drawing even more pleasant mewls and moans from Ria's as she bounced back and forth. He stopped moving briefly and slowly pulled all the way out, forcing Ria's eyes to go wide because she felt as though he was pulling her inside out. She screamed when he plunged right back in, destroying her balance, but he managed to catch her, raise one of her legs, and rotate her into a missionary position. On. Naruto. Naruto. HNNN. I don't think I can take it anymore, she exclaimed, trembling from the intense stimulation she felt. She could only arc her back while quivering as his hands held her firmly in place as he assaulted her with his thrusts. He resisted the urge to scream, "What? Already?" Instead, he opted to maintain his tempo, using his previous experiences as his guide. When she says, "right there" or "like this," make sure you keep it that way, otherwise, you could inevitably spoil her experience. Her fleshy walls catered to every inch of his member, and that felt amazing, however, his focus was almost exclusive to her pleasure. More. Ah. On. On. She moaned like a wanton as she began moving her hips in an attempt to match his thrusts. Getting the message, Naruto pressed her down further into the bed and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he slowly started increasing the tempo with her moans increasing along with it. He abruptly moved his left hand to play with her nipples, forcing her to raise her voice. Beads of sweat trickled down her flushed face, and hot maddening breaths followed as she finally started getting used to the foreign experience. Why yes, fuck me. Make me yours, pinch them. She exclaimed as her breasts were expertly kneaded and pulled by the blonde. Their grace was akin to touching glass with hands lubricated by lotion and a dancer with many years to perfect their craft. He knew what he was doing and could easily adjust based on her body language alone. Her moans of approval made his hands work in a hard, feverish manner, in tweaking her nipples. "You're fantastic, can you hold on for a bit longer, dear?" he whispered into her ear huskily, plunging Ria's cheeks further into a pool of pink. Ria's reached up to him and wrapped her arms around her shoulders and embraced him tightly whilst clamping her eyes with the same amount of force. Had she been paying attention, she would have noticed that she was embracing with strength that surpassed a large constrictor. He felt her walls tightening even further, showing that she was doing her best to not let herself go. As what felt like an eternity elapsed, Ria started whimpering in his embrace. All it would take was a slight slip of the mind and she would release. The overwhelming feeling welling up in her body was like a geyser being suppressed, leading to her frame shaking desperately as lewd noises originating from her crotch overpowered her moans. I know, hang on a bit longer, Kay. He replied before ceasing his other ministrations so as to prolong her time. I'll try. She responded as she increased her grip on him again. Her mind was too far gone to realize how much strength she was using on her. Obscene, smacking sounds flooded the room, only somewhat rivaled by the devil's moans and the human's grunting. He raised his hand and brought it down on her ass, soliciting a yelp that contained both pain and pleasure. He chanted, "You like that, huh?" in a hushed voice whilst she tightened her grip. He brought his face close, and she immediately pressed her lips onto his and shoved her tongue into his mouth, attempting to dominate for once. Hers and Naruto's tongues pushed against each other and swayed to the side before slithering over each other and curling against each other to assert domination. Like a battle between expert fencers, their tongues probed each other and batted each other to the side, but Ria's tongue lost a few seconds into the altercation. She couldn't fathom how she lost so quickly, but she felt no shame nor hurt, instead, she loved it. Their lips separated, only being connected by a bridge of saliva that quickly collapsed as Ria's mouth opened into a wide circle as her eye seemed to want to slip into her skull. Her sexy mewls and moans finally stirred Naruto, who had solely focused on her pleasure, to start focusing on his. He started losing himself as his member kept entering and exiting the carven that held it like a vice. He raised his hand once more and brought it down to her bottom, jiggling the supple flesh struck by it. "That girl, I am about to come." His hot breath tickled her neck, causing her to lose control. The jacer exploded and her love juices surged from deep within her. "Oh Satan!" she screamed as her walls clamped down on his member, which caused it to twitch and expand before secreting a globe of white warm fluid. The ejaculation seemed to prolong itself and make itself very brief simultaneously, nearly causing the devil's mind to melt. She went limp and allowed herself to fall onto his lean chest as he slowly extracted his member, causing her to moan at the loss of length. Naruto placed her back onto the bed and watched with a keen eye as her gaping hole dripped his cum. He wanted to plunge himself back in there, but he didn't think she could handle it. His reasoning like hers started warping but not to the same extent. I remember her saying that I can do as I wish with her body when we have sex. A sludge of blood and ejaculate seeped out of slightly open labia as the girl struggled to regain her breath. He was one of the few without a refractory period, so he remained hard as he ate up her form. He had given her the first time, but now it was time to move on to her other statement. He turned her onto her stomach and made her raise her hips before plunging his fingers into her cum-soaked vagina. And then Naruto, please wait, I'm still sensitive. Wait. No. Hey. She was ignored as he scooped up more cum and let it rest on his hand before plunging his member back into her snatch. It had no trouble accepting the length and girth by the mind of its owner was sent elsewhere as what felt like pleasant sparks of electricity flooded her body. They were far too pleasant. On. Her sensitive body tried jerking away from him, but it was far too late. His left arm had already secured her body and prevented her from jumping away. The sounds of cheeks getting wrecked echoed through the room as Naruto grunted openly as he relished his girlfriend's perfect pussy. Ah. 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 Stupid and narrow. I'll get you fo dish. Her words slurred as he crammed as much of his member as he could into her with no success as a few inches were out of her vagina. She felt like her gut was being punched as the boy plowed into her hole with the aggressiveness of a Spartan. As her ass rippled back and forth, it kept revealing a dark, crinkled star that was wet and quivering as Naruto plowed into her pussy. The blonde had a lot of energy left, and there was plenty he wanted to do with the bombshell of a body in his arms. He looked around the room as his pelvis rammed against her plump peach-shaped ass. Her moans resembled those of an animal as she felt every inch of what inside of her piston in and out. His masculine strength prevented her from moving, forcing her to take great punishment in the form of searing pleasure. Naruto slid his right hand below her crotch, catching more juices before sliding it between her cheeks and lathered her backdoor with cum. Riaz didn't panic as she knew this would happen because of the contents of the pornos he thought she didn't know about, but she did know about them. Her pounding heart from nervousness roused her from her pleasure-guilty brain death. Gimme your F finger, she managed to choke out as she struggled to keep herself from being overwhelmed yet again. It was in front of her, and she spat on it, and a red magic circle appeared around it. Naruto watched in fascination as his pointer finger seemed to produce lubrication, but didn't watch long and got to work on prepping her for the next stage. If her sensitive body weren't being ruthlessly fucked, she would have felt a cold, viscous fluid invading her colon. Instead, she wondered how he was able to keep such a high thrusting pace whilst working on her anus. It was beyond her, so she didn't question it. She tried not screaming in pleasure as he wrecked her booty and smashed her G-spot. The tip of his finger being barred entry was resolved by him slapping her ass firmly and nibbling her the nape of her neck. The way her anal ring clamped around his finger told him that, had he been a normal human, there was no way he would keep it. Relax, he growled, and Riaz moaned in response, allowing for Naruto to slip in 2 fingers, then 3, then finally 4. Naruto felt her ass getting used to and adjusting his index finger, and so he inserted his middle finger, then his ring before spreading them repeated, loosening her up. I am coming. She moaned as a clear fluid exploded out her pussy, causing her to arch her back in pleasure. Naruto smiled as he pulled out of her pussy, causing more fluid semen to flow out. He got onto the bed and crouched above her, placing his head close to her rosebud. Wait, she whined, lem rest first you brute, she continued, regretting telling him to do as he wished. Denied. Upon his refusal, Riaz felt his glands using rigid force to push its way in. She held back a scream as she felt his member slowly sink into her bowel. Oh. On. She vocalized her discomfort whilst pushing her ass up to fully consume his dick. The feeling of anal was completely alien to her and was painful, but not to the point that she'd jump away from him. She mentally encouraged herself to hang on as surely there was a limit to his seemingly limitless endurance. Yuck. She moaned, swirling her hips, feeling his girthy cock reach her deepest parts with ease. You freaking tight, oh dang. Can't underestimate you devils and your erotic bodies. I wonder what fallen angels feel like, he groaned, ignoring the withering glare she sent at him. He abruptly pulled out, leaving only the tip outside her ass, before plunging in with Herculean force, causing the bed to collapse. He thrust it into her incredibly tight ass, loving every moment of it. He enjoyed watching it expand and contracted as he partially exited it and re-entered into it. As he humped her, Ria's discomfort, which was made up of how her stomach felt like it was skewered and her intestines forcefully inflated. If she wasn't committed to this, she would have wanted to quit, but she didn't because Naruto's groans encouraged her. She was making feel good. That was more than enough of a reason for her to grit her teeth and hold on. As he continued using her backdoor, the uncomfortable expansion and skewering suddenly shifted into a strange but refreshing feeling. Her pain groans reverted back to their pleasant form, once again encouraging Naruto to do it better. She didn't say anything because this time she wanted him to set the pace at his own convenience. He lifted his hand and brought it down on her ass, pulling a small yelp from the girl. He loved her sexy moans. He desired them, so he raised it again and brought it down with more force. Ria's back arched, the pain converted itself into pleasure. One hand continued swatting her buttocks, and his other hand slipped over the fleshing protrusion found on her vagina. Her coquettish sounds echoed through the room. In fact, the entire neighborhood would have heard her had Naruto's room not been soundproofed. His lower abdomen hit her ass, sending ripple through her ass and creating smacking sounds. Ria's tightness clamped onto him, signifying that she was about to come again. He too was coming close, so he released his final shot, feeling his semen leaving the ticklish head of his cock. Arg. He grunted. Once done, he slowly pulled his dick out of her ass and once again admired his handiwork. Semen trickled out of her gaping anus, allowing it to match her pussy, which was also dripping. He could have easily continued. After all, Hinata was a crazy nymphomaniac that required both he and Ino to gang up on her in order to satisfy her during the early stages of their relationship. He eventually got used to it and grew to outlast them both. Good times. Naruto used his arm to cradle to panting Ria's, warmly smiling. So how was it? It was great at the start until you went crazy on me, you dumb brute, she pouted cutely, turning her flushed face away from his. Well, while in the spooning position, he lifted one of her legs, slipped his member into her pussy, and slowly thrust it, earning a low moan from the girl. You naughty boy, she chastised but didn't move to stop him from pleasing himself. No, I can do this later, we still have an issue at hand. Ria's Naruto paused, pulling out and turning her to make eye contact with him. If there is a problem, let's talk about it. What's wrong? He spoke in a halting and shy manner, like a person who was afraid of the answer they were going to receive. She gained a downhearted expression and pulled into an embrace, her arms shaking as they wrapped around his being. Her hold was possessive by nature, as he could tell that she was desperately trying to hold back the devil strength she possessed. The strength that could pop him. He felt a wetness on his chest, hearing silent whimpers which his enhanced could make out. I'm sorry. He didn't have the time to think logically about what that could mean. He instead did both what he desired and what he was obliged to do. He just held her close and didn't utter a word, both physically and mentally. He reached for his sheets and tossed them over to cover their naked forms. Ria's, he called out to her after a few moments passed. Yes, my love. The devils have a law where people are allowed to fight over the right to take the hand of a woman. Yes, maybe if I could defeat Riser, then we could always be together. She gave information she didn't give earlier. I see. Then I want to challenge this heir. You are mine and mine alone. If you are the king of your peerage, then I am your high lord. It is my duty to watch over and protect my subordinates, he said. Fuck my secrets, fuck my past, she needs me. He affirmed to himself. At some points after he pulled the covers over them, he discreetly began the progress of unsealing his power. It wasn't a significant portion, but it was more than enough to show Rias that she could believe and trust him. Do you realize what you are saying? She rose out of the sheets in wide eyes. Before she could react, Naruto palm landed on her chest, sending her through the wall and making her land at the center of the living room. Coughing and flaring her magic power to clear the dust, she noted that the tiny living room had become expansive. The walls themselves stretched and the appliances contorted in a display of surrealism. Allow me to reintroduce myself, she heard a voice coming from her right. There he was, seated on top of a floating table with one leg hand and the other one bent at the knee, placed onto of the table as he rested on of his arms on it. He was no longer naked, instead he was dressed black baggy pants with a black jacket with blue fox designs over it. His eyes glowed a faint hue of blue as he stared at her. Rias knew this was her boyfriend, so she did not retaliate it. Instead she looked upon him with a muted gaze. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, the strongest human. Thanks for watching.